I had just finished pouring my coffee when I heard the unmistakable crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. Before I could even get to the door, my son Johann walked right in, with his wife Helga and my two grandkids, Greta and Klaus, trailing behind. 6 suitcases landed with a thud right there in the middle of my living room. Helga didn't say a word, no hello, no nothing. She just said, "You'll be moving downstairs. The upstairs is ours now." A little smile crept onto my face, but not because I was happy. I'd already figured out what they were up to. And if they had any idea what I'd been getting ready for, they might not have ever set foot in my house. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. They didn't see the way my hands were steady as a rock when I put my coffee cup down on that old oak table. Living for over 80 years teaches you a lot about keeping your cool. How to hold your breath and not let it out when someone tries to steal the air from your lungs. Johann was already on his way upstairs like he owned the place, walking right past the grandfather clock I'd gotten from my own dad. Helga hung back for a second, giving the room a slow once-over, like she was deciding what to throw out first. Then she followed him up. Greta, my granddaughter, gave me a small, shy smile, the kind you give someone you like but aren't quite sure how to talk to. Klaus didn't even bother to look up from his phone. "Good to see you, too," I muttered under my breath, but nobody heard me. Upstairs, I could hear drawers being yanked open and slammed shut. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the bitter warmth calm me down. Back when my wife Frida was still around, this house never felt invaded. Even a surprise visit was always a happy occasion. We bought this place back in the late 70s. It was a beat-up 2-story place on the edge of Lake Spruce, with peeling paint and a roof that groaned every time a storm rolled in. It took years of hard work to turn it into the home we loved so much. We laughed through those years, and sure, we had our arguments, but it was ours. Now I was listening to my own son act like he was a contractor sizing up a property he'd just closed on, and that sense of safety felt like it was gone for good. "Johann." I called up, trying to keep my voice even. "What's going on?" His voice floated down from upstairs. "We told you, Dad. We're getting some work done on our house. Need a place to crash for a couple of weeks." "I don't remember you telling me that," I said. "You must have forgotten," he said, and I heard the annoyance in his voice, even though he tried to sound casual. Helga showed up at the top of the stairs. "We'll be out of your hair before you know it." "That's fine," I said, "but the upstairs bedroom." Johann cut me off. "Dad, the stairs aren't good for you. This way, you've got the bathroom right there. No risk of falling." I looked him in the eye and saw that fake, rehearsed look, like a salesman trying to close a deal. "I've managed those stairs for over 40 years, I said. Helga gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And we'd like to keep it that way. Let us help. Some fights just aren't worth the trouble." I turned and walked to the small room off the living room. It had been a guest room for as long as I could remember. It had a single bed, a small dresser, no closet, more of a storage room than a real bedroom. Now it was mine. Upstairs, the sound of zippers and bags being emptied filled the house. By the middle of the afternoon, their stuff was everywhere. Johann's duffel bags were slouched on the couch. Helga had draped a scarf over the armchair where Frida used to read. My coffee table was now covered in a bunch of candles that smelled like fake lavender and chemicals. I caught Helga in the kitchen, peering into my fridge. "This milk expired yesterday," she said, holding it up like it was evidence of a crime. "I drink it with my coffee," I replied. "Johann, grab some oat milk later," she yelled. "I've lived this long without oat milk," I muttered. "Well, we'll just make a few small changes," she said with that same tight smile. I stepped outside onto the deck to get some air. The lake was calm under a pale sun. A pair of geese floated near the reeds. Out here, the air was clean, not filled with the feeling of my house being taken over. Helping family wasn't the issue. Lord knows I did my part for Johann, college tuition, the down payment for his first house, and I even helped with his mortgage when the market crashed. I never kept score. But this was different. They weren't asking, they were taking. That's the first step in building a wall around you. When I went back inside, Greta was in the kitchen alone, pouring herself a glass of water. "Hi, Grandpa," she said. "Hey, kiddo. Everything okay?" She shrugged. "Yeah. College is just a lot." "You'll get through it," I said. "How long are you all staying?" She hesitated. "They said, a month, but I don't know." Helga's voice carried in from the living room. "Greta, come help me." She gave me a quick, apologetic look and left. That night, lying in that small, cramped guest room, I could hear voices through the floorboards. I couldn't make out the words, just a low, steady sound of conversation. People don't bring 6 suitcases for just a couple of weeks, I thought. And they don't take over the master bedroom because of safety reasons. The next night, Helga made pasta for dinner, announcing it like she was presenting some fancy dish. "So," Johann said between bites, "I was thinking about the living room. If we moved the couch to face the lake, it would really open the place up." "This is my house, Johann," I said. "Of course. Just thinking ahead. Good for resale value." "Resale?" I asked. Helga reached over and squeezed his arm. "Ignore him. He's always talking business." But the look they shared told me everything. I excused myself, washed my plate with water so hot my glasses steamed up, and went out into the cool night. Johann's laugh drifted out the window. They thought they had already set the new rules. The moon made a silver path across the water. I thought of Frida, who'd been gone for over 10 years, but her voice was still there in moments like these. "Don't let them make decisions for you, Gunter," she'd say. I hadn't. Not yet. And maybe I had been holding on to a plan longer than I even knew. This wasn't the first time I'd seen someone try to take something that wasn't theirs. Back when I was a customs inspector, I learned to spot a scam from a mile away. They were moving their pieces into place, and so was I. I woke to the soft tick of the old clock in the hallway and the faint sound of a chair scraping upstairs. For a second, I forgot they were here. Then a suitcase zipper rasped, a footstep made the ceiling shift, and the house remembered for me. I stared at the low ceiling of the guest room, at the little spot of peeling paint I'd always meant to fix, and reached for my slippers. My knees made a sound I pretended not to hear. I'd slept terribly, too hot under a blanket that wasn't mine, and too keyed up by the feeling of being watched, even in a room with no window to the hall. By the time I got to the kitchen, a new world order was in place. The coffee maker had been moved to the other side of the counter for workflow, a word that had never once been used in my kitchen. A bunch of glass jars with labels, chia, flax, hemp, stood where my sugar used to be. My coffee mug, the chipped one with the little blue flowers Frida picked out at a tourist shop near the dunes, had been pushed to the back of the cabinet, behind 4 tall white mugs that all matched each other and nothing else in my house. "Morning," Helga said without turning around. She was wearing my spare robe, the one Frida used to wear when she watered her basil, and was stirring something in a pan with a wooden spoon like she was on a cooking show. "We're trying oatmeal with almond butter today. Better for cholesterol." "I take my statin, thanks," I said, and reached for the kettle. "I'll make my own." She put the spoon in the sink with a little clink that said that was the end of that conversation. "Johann got a pill organizer for you," she said. "Just to make it easier. I've managed my pills for over 30 years without getting lost on my way to a glass of water." Johann came in, tying his tie, hair still wet, smelling of the expensive cologne he started wearing when he began closing bigger deals. "Dad," he said, with a tone that was full of apology but eyes that held none. "It's just about having a system. Structure keeps everyone sane." "When did I lose my sanity?" I asked. He laughed like I'd just told a joke. Klaus came in and opened the fridge. "Are we out of energy drinks?" he asked to no one, already disappointed. Greta followed a second later, her ponytail crooked, her sweater inside out, sleep still in her eyes. "Good morning," she said to me and meant it. I watched her notice the pill organizer, then her mom's robe, and finally my face. She quickly looked down and pulled the tag back into her sweater where it belonged. At 8:05, Helga tapped the thermostat. "We're going to keep it at 72 during the day. The air is dry." At 8:10, she muted the morning news and asked if there was a way to get a channel that was less political. At 8:15, Johann showed me an email from the cable company about a faster router he'd ordered in my name. "You'll thank me when you can stream without buffering," he said. "I don't stream," I said. "You will," he said. I took my coffee outside and sat on the back steps, where the paint had worn away to wood the color of tea. The lake wore the morning like a shawl, a thin fog lifting from its surface. Gulls flew through it and vanished into the bright light. Across the water, the old marina sign made a gentle thunking sound in the breeze against the pole. That sound used to annoy me. Frida said it made the place feel lived in. She'd be the one to hear it now and say, "Leave it, Gunter. There are worse noises in the world." She'd say it and then hum. She always hummed when she watered plants or wiped down counters or waited for cookies to bake. The house hummed with her then. Now it hummed in a different key. When I came back inside, the framed photo that always sat on the mantel was gone. It was a picture of Frida and me on the day we finally fixed the porch railing, both of us sweaty, ridiculous, and proud. It was now sitting on the piano, tucked behind a stack of glossy magazines about home decorating. In its place on the mantel was a white ceramic knot that was supposed to be art. "Less clutter," Helga said when she saw me looking. "Clutter," I repeated and slid the photo back to the mantel, right where the light hit Frida's hair just so. I didn't give a big speech about it. You don't spend years learning to read people and not know that a speech will just put you on the spot. Johann spent the morning on calls, his voice bouncing around the house like a tennis ball, underpriced comps, ballooning HOA fees, sellers dragging their feet. Every few minutes, he'd walk into a room he wasn't calling from and stand in the doorway, looking at things like they were already his. He measured the dining room with his foot, heel to toe, counting under his breath. He opened my liquor cabinet and then closed it like he was checking something off a list. "Around noon," he said, "we should talk about getting the deck resealed before winter. It'll add life to the finish." "It gets sealed every other year," I said. "I do it myself." He blinked like I just said I'd hand crank the elevator. "Let us help with the hire," he said. "I've got a guy." "I'm the guy," I said. He laughed again. He had that special laugh just for me and no one else. They ate lunch at the kitchen island and left their plates in the sink with the water running over them like it was a cleansing ritual. I was halfway through loading the dishwasher when Helga came back to rearrange the plates I'd put in. "Horizontal," she said. "It's more efficient." "So is closing the tap," I said. Her smile told me my jokes weren't funny today. That afternoon, a white van with a logo I didn't recognize rolled into the driveway. A guy with a tape measure, no older than 30, got out. He had that loose, lazy walk of someone who gets paid by the hour. He knocked on the door the way people do when they're pretending they might have to wait. I opened it before he got to 3. "Here for the measurements," he said, flipping his clipboard. "Kitchen." "Measurements for what?" I asked. He checked the name again. Schmidt. Helga booked a free estimate. Cabinet refacing. I looked at the kitchen that had learned the shape of my arms and Frida's hands over the past 40 years. The cabinet doors had little nicks that told stories. The Thanksgiving the turkey almost fell on the floor, the night we hosted Frida's sister and her 2 kids and realized you could run out of plates if you weren't careful, the time Greta was 5 and colored on a lower panel with a green crayon, and Frida said to leave it because it was better than any paint. "Not today," I said. He looked confused, then relieved, then worried about his sales quota. "Can I leave a brochure?" "You can leave," I said politely, the way people from the Midwest are rude. Johann came from wherever he had been and clapped the kid on the back. "Sorry, buddy," he said. "My dad's old school. We'll give you a call." The man took this as both an instruction and an excuse, and retreated to his van, where a dangling air freshener hit the windshield in the wind. When Johann closed the door, he leaned his forehead against it for a second, like he had the world's most serious headache. "Dad," he said, turning around. "We talked about updating. Small things. Smart things. You want this place to last." "It has," I said. "Longer than most marriages." "Very funny," he said, which meant he didn't think it was funny at all. "Helga got us a free estimate." "Free. It always starts free," I said. "So does advice." He put his hands in his pockets and looked down at the entryway tile. Frida insisted on it, even though I thought it was too modern. "You know, Dad," he said, "you're not the only one who loves this house." "I've noticed," I said. He lifted his head, and his eyes had that shine some men get right before a deal is about to go through. "We should make sure it's positioned for." "Positioned for what?" I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it. I watched him pick a new answer the way he'd pick a shirt. "For you," he said. "For your needs." "I need my bed where my bed has been," I said. "I need my photo where my photo lives. I need to drink my coffee without being managed." "Structure," he said again, as if saying the word could make everything better. "Save it for the decaf," I said. Late that afternoon, I found Helga in the hall with a roll of blue painter's tape, sticking little pieces on the walls next to framed pictures. "What are you doing?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Marking things to reorganize. We need visual consistency." "Visual consistency," I said. "Is that like family?" She put a piece of tape next to a photo of Frida at the lake in a straw hat, kneeling down to show Greta how to hold a frog without hurting it. "We'll keep the nice ones," she said. "They're all nice," I said. "This one's blurry," she said, and pulled at the nail. Without even thinking, without planning it, I held up my hand. Something in my chest just moved forward. "Leave them," I said, my voice low. She looked at me like I'd grabbed her wrist. "We're not throwing them away," she said. "We're just curating." "Curating is what museums do to other people's lives," I said. "These are mine." A shadow fell over the hallway light, and Johann appeared at the top of the stairs. "Everything okay?" he asked, the way you do when you've already heard enough to know it's not. "Your father has feelings about the hall," Helga said. Johann's smile for me was the same one he used on clients who were about to walk out on a deal. "Let's table the gallery wall," he said, like we were in one of his business meetings. He kissed the top of Helga's head, and she put the tape in her pocket, taking her sweet time to show me it wasn't a surrender, just a delay. I ate dinner early just to have a meal that didn't require a discussion. Scrambled eggs and toast that was a little too dark because I forgot to watch it. Frida always knew when to pop the slices up. Johann and Helga were out for quick drinks with a business partner, and the kids were in their rooms doing whatever kids do when they think they're invisible. The house was briefly itself again. The tick of the clock, the soft hum of the fridge, a floorboard that creaked in the hall when the heat came on. I picked up a book but put it down after a single paragraph that didn't stick with me. The remote felt slimy in my hand, like I shouldn't be using it. The channels were all full of people shouting at each other. I turned it off and sat in the quiet, listening to the house breathe. Mail was on the entry table, a neat pile of white. When I went through it, I found a bundle held together with a rubber band that wasn't mine. There were forwarding notices from the post office, a glossy postcard for a senior living showcase at a hotel off Route 12, and a coupon for stairlifts. My name was at the top of the bundle, but not in my handwriting. Someone had filled out a form for me, and my life had been turned into a brochure I never asked for. I stood there holding the postcard, with its picture of a smiling couple with gray hair on a couch that looked like a waiting room. I thought about what people call options, when what they really mean are decisions someone else made for you. I put the bundle in the drawer where Frida kept birthday candles and the kitchen scissors. Then I took it out again and slid it under a pile of appliance manuals no one reads but everyone keeps. I didn't want Greta to see it. And I didn't want to see it either. Around 8 o'clock, my phone chimed. A text from Otto at the marina. "Gunter, you still want me to renew the slip? Deadline's Friday." He's been holding a spot for me since Frida got sick and we sold the old aluminum fishing boat to pay a hospital bill that insurance pretended to cover. I told him I'd think about it last week, just to be polite. Now the message sat in my palm like a challenge. I typed, "Yes, renew. See you tomorrow," and hit send before I could change my mind. Maybe I'd rent a rowboat now and then. Maybe I'd just walk the dock and smell the rope and sun-cracked wood and remember things the way you do if you practice. At 9 o'clock, the door opened and closed with the quiet hush of people trying to be silent but wanting to be heard. Laughter was muffled in the entryway, the whisper of shoes being taken off. My body remembered the sound of a late return from when Johan was 18, and Frida would sit at the kitchen table with a book she wasn't reading, and I would pretend to be watching a game so he'd have two grumpy people to deal with. Now I lay in the guest room that wasn't meant for a person and listened to the adult version of that sound and couldn't decide which version hurt more. "Dad," Johan's voice said at the door, soft like a hand not wanting to wake a sleeping dog. He didn't open it. He pushed his words through the wood. "We're back. Big day tomorrow. Sleep well." The way he said, "sleep well," made me hear, "good boy." The next morning came earlier than I wanted. I came out to find the kitchen island clean, with a citrus smell in the air. Helga had arranged a basket of rolled towels under the sink like a spa. "We're making it nicer," she said, even though I hadn't asked. She typed something into her phone and looked up brightly. "I booked a cleaning service for Thursdays. They'll do the blinds and baseboards. You shouldn't have to bend." "I'm not bending," I said. "Exactly," she said. Johan breezed in wearing a jacket with a pocket square that matched his socks. "Dad, a city inspector is coming by around 10 o'clock. Routine check on the smoke detectors." I scheduled it with the app. "You scheduled the city?" I said. He waved a hand. "The utility. Technically. Everybody's tech-forward now." At 10 o'clock on the dot, a man in a pale shirt with a laminated badge came in. He had a beeper that squawked at each ceiling disc. "Batteries," he said. "Mostly fine, but the one upstairs is on its last legs." "Aren't we all?" I said. He smiled like he'd been trained to appreciate that kind of humor. He wrote something on a form and made me sign a receipt for a service that used to be handled by me on a ladder on a Saturday in July, with Frida standing below, her hands out to catch the old 9V battery. When he left, Johan clapped his hands once like a coach signaling a change. "Okay," he said to no one. "Progress." He went outside to the driveway to take a call, and I turned to find Helga in the pantry with a pen and a pad, making a list that looked less like groceries and more like demands. "Filtered water pitcher," she wrote out loud, as if narrating it made it less ridiculous. "Calcium supplements. Bone broth. Write down pie," I said. "The cherry kind Frida liked." She paused just long enough to process the name, then wrote seasonal fruit. By noon, I'd found out two new things that I hadn't thought were possible: how much a house could change in 48 hours and how quickly a man with his name on the deed could become a guest in his own home. If there's a trick to it, it's simple. You don't break doors or shout. You change the grammar. My mug becomes our mugs. My chair becomes extra seating. My bedroom becomes the upstairs. It's a small change in words with big consequences. At 1 o'clock, a delivery truck arrived with 2 long boxes. Johann wheeled them into the living room. "Curtain panels," he said. "Shears. The light is flattering for." I asked, "For what?" He wiggled a hand vaguely, like the light would just know what to do when it got there. I helped him lift the boxes onto the rug because that's what you do when a person you raised is moving furniture through a room where you'll eventually have to sit. The cardboard edges dug into my palm and brought up a memory I hadn't asked for: Frida at the dining room table, cutting fabric, holding pins in her mouth, laughing without poking herself. "Don't talk to me," she'd say. "I'm doing math." She'd say that and then ask me what I thought of blue versus cream, and I'd say, whichever one makes the room feel like a morning you want to keep. We bought cream because it was more forgiving when we spilled wine. "Dad?" Johann said, standing a foot away. "You okay?" "Just thinking math," I said. By late afternoon, the wind had picked up in that way it does off the lake. It was like a little troublemaker, squeezing down the alley next to the house and yanking at the gutter. A cloud moved in front of the sun, and the light in the living room turned the color of old paper. I heard a drawer open upstairs and the sound of hangers scraping on a rod. I thought of the closet up there, long as a short hallway. It was half empty now because I had moved my clothes to the small dresser in the room off the living room, where shirts were folded on themselves like they wanted to go somewhere else. I had left Frida's things where they always were: her winter coat in the back corner in a garment bag, her red scarf on a hook, a cardboard shoe box on the top shelf that held a bunch of old Valentine's cards, concert stubs, and a postcard from our honeymoon that said, "Wish you were here," even though we were already there. I went up to make sure the scarf was still on the hook. I don't know what I would have done if it wasn't. Just stand there and hold the air where it had been. Maybe tell Johann a story about the day she bought it and how the cashier gave us a discount because she said Frida's smile had fixed her back pain. Maybe I just wanted to see it in case my chest forgot the exact red. At the top of the stairs, Helga stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, arms crossed, looking in like there was a puzzle inside, and if she stared long enough, it would tell her how to solve it. The boxes were open on the bed. Johann's suit jackets hung on the new hangers. He liked those black velvet ones that keep shoulders neat. The scarf was on the hook, but not the way I'd left it. Someone had looped it the way they dress mannequins. "We'll get bins," Helga said when she saw me looking at the boxes. "For seasonal." "Seasonal," I said. "What season is a life?" She did that thing where she smiled to show that an old man's metaphor wasn't a threat to her. "We're making room," she said. "For what's next?" I asked. "Whose?" She blinked once, and then the blink turned to determination so fast you could see the line between them. "Everyone's," she said. "We're family." "Good," I said. "Then you won't mind if I move my boots back where my boots belong." I walked past her and put them back in the corner by the door. A small act of rebellion that looked like tidying up. At dinner, Greta did most of the talking. Bless her heart. She told a story about a professor who made a joke no one laughed at and then kept going with it until it got funny. Klaus said exactly 2 words, "group project," with the tone of a man describing a prison sentence. Johann checked his phone under the table, and Helga talked about a client who wanted an ottoman that felt coastal. I ate and listened, and when Helga reached for the olive oil bottle, I handed it to her before she asked, just to prove to myself that I still knew how to anticipate a person. After I washed the plates without saying a word and dried them with the towel Frida liked, the one with cherries on it, the cherries had faded to the color of old pennies. There's a kind of peace in doing a thing with your hands that your hands remember better than your mind. There's also a kind of sadness. I was on the back steps with my jacket collar turned up against the evening chill when the screen door creaked and settled and creaked again. Greta stood in the doorway. A halo of kitchen light behind her, her hands stuffed in the sleeves of a sweatshirt that said, Lake Spruce University, in cracked letters. "Grandpa," she said, her voice low, like she didn't want the walls to hear. "Do you have a minute?" "I've got all of them," I said. She glanced over her shoulder and then out at the darkening lake, where the last stripe of orange was losing its hold on the water. "Can we walk?" she asked. "Just around the yard." We went down the steps together. The grass had that early cold feel that makes it seem damp even when it's not. The neighbor's wind chime tried to find a song and settled for a clatter. Greta kicked a pebble off the path and put her hands in her pockets, took them out, and put them back in again. Finally, she looked up at me with a face I had only seen once before, when she was 7 and had knocked over a vase and was about to tell the truth anyway. "Grandpa," she said, her breath turning into a little cloud of words, now in a hurry since they had finally decided to come out. "I think." She stopped herself, gave a tiny cough like she was clearing a stage. "No. I know. There's something you need to hear." Greta's breath hung in the air like a secret she wasn't brave enough to own just yet. We walked the edge of the yard where the grass gave way to scrub and the lake began again, a darker shade of night. I could feel her searching for the first word that would make the next 100 possible. "Take your time," I said, even though my heart was already beating faster. "You know the feeling, the body gets the message before the mind does. Years at a customs desk taught me to trust that feeling." She nodded, her eyes on the water. "Okay. So, I didn't mean to hear it. I wasn't snooping, I swear." Her voice wavered and then found a straighter line. "They were in the kitchen after you went outside last night." Mom was excited. She talks faster when she's excited. "She said they'd put down a deposit for a place." "What kind of place?" My voice stayed calm, the way you keep a match from blowing out. "A senior community," she said, and then quickly added, "That's what they called it." But then Mom said the real term on the contract was assisted living. She said it would solve everything. Greta made little air quotes that looked like they hurt her to make. They were talking like it was already decided. I didn't say anything. The wind moved one of the tall reeds, and then the next, and then the next, like something invisible was running a hand along the shore. "I asked Dad about it this morning in the car," she continued. "I kept it casual. I said, 'Are we moving, Grandpa?' He seems fine. And he said, 'It's for his safety. He needs a routine and supervision. We can't be here forever. Besides," she swallowed, "we'll need the rooms when Grandma and Grandpa move in." She stared down at her shoes. "They're selling their condo in Silver Creek. Mom wants them here by Thanksgiving." "Of course she does," I said, and the words came out softer than I felt. "I told him it's not fair," she said, that you know how to take care of yourself. He said I don't understand adult decisions yet." She rolled her eyes in a way that wasn't teenage, just human. "And then he said not to tell you because you'd get anxious and spiral. I hate that word." She looked up at me then like she was ready for punishment for disobeying. "I'm telling you." "Good," I said. "I'd rather spiral than be lied to." She laughed, surprised and sad. "Grandpa." We walked a few more steps, the two of us moving back toward the porch light and its little circle of gold. I could see our reflections in the kitchen window, her shoulders tight, my posture trying to look taller than old age allows. "How much do you know?" I asked. Besides the deposit, they toured a bunch of places last week. They settled on one called Oak Knoll. It's in Maple Grove near the highway. Mom likes it because it's clean and within 15 minutes of good hospitals. Dad likes it because they have a shuttle and social programs, so he doesn't feel guilty not visiting. She said the last part quickly, ashamed for him. They need a doctor's note for assisted living appropriateness, but Mom already made an appointment with a clinic that understands elder care pathways. Her words. "Next Tuesday." She put it on your calendar. The one she made. Greta's hands clenched and unclenched in her sleeves. I looked it up between classes. People leave reviews. Some are good, some are not. People said the staff turnover is high. That if you don't have someone checking on you, you can get lost. The knife slid in between two ribs, quiet and efficient. I didn't even flinch. "Thank you," I said. It wasn't enough, and it was everything. "I know you don't need me to fix it," she said, as if she thought she was overstepping. I couldn't not tell you. You feel. She searched for the word and then found one older than she was. Cornered. "Do I?" I asked, a smile I didn't feel lifting one corner of my mouth. She nodded a little. We reached the steps. She lingered at the bottom, looking up at me like she used to when she was little and needed permission to keep a ladybug overnight in a jar. "I can try to talk to them again," she offered. "Or I can just keep you posted if they plan anything. You've done enough for tonight." I put a hand on her shoulder. "Just don't get yourself in trouble on my account." She snorted. "Too late. Mom already thinks I'm too emotional about all this." I told her it's not emotions, it's ethics. That's my girl. She pulled me into a quick hug that was mostly sweatshirt and determination. When she went inside, she didn't let the screen door bang. She caught it with 2 fingers and eased it closed so the house wouldn't wake up. I stood there alone and watched the lake darken the last notch. There's a point at sunset where the water and the sky are the same shade, and you can't tell where one ends. I waited for the line to appear again. It always does if you wait. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table and laid my hands flat on the wood Frida had oiled every spring. My hands looked like my father's hands and his father's before him. Thick knuckles, a map of veins, a scar along the base of the thumb from a drill that slipped back in 1982. The ache behind my chest didn't leave, but it got organized. It stopped buzzing and started to hum. I know that hum. It's the sound of a plan beginning to breathe. I didn't go to the guest room. I went upstairs. The master bedroom smelled faintly of fabric softener that wasn't ours. Johann's jackets lined the rail like pine trees lining a highway. Helga had stacked 2 storage bins in the corner, the lids a little off-kilter like intentions not fully closed. I walked over to Frida's dresser and... My son Klaus's office wants him at some client breakfast, and I've got a couple of floor displays to get done. The cleaning crew's supposed to show up around 11 o'clock, and Hilda has a class. If you're heading out, shoot me a text. I threw a tracker on your phone so we know where you are and that you're safe. I buttered a piece of toast real careful like. Just so you know where to find me. To help, she said. Right. Like a kid trying to help you do a job you already know how to do. Klaus came out in his shirt sleeves, puttin' on a tie I'd gotten him a few Father's Days back. Mornin', Pops. We might be back late. Don't wait up for dinner, he said. He gave Frida a peck on her head without even looking, like he was flipping a light switch he'd flipped 1,000,000 times before. Hilda came in right after, hair still wet, earbuds in. She gave me a quick look from under her eyelashes that said, "You okay?" I just gave her a little nod, the kind of nod 2 guys in the know trade when the boss leaves the room. After they were gone, the house let out a big ol' sigh I hadn't even realized it was holding in. The quiet wasn't like it was before they showed up. This quiet had some dents in it, but it was all mine to use. I washed my dishes, wiped down the counter, and just walked through the rooms like a man checking his property, not looking at the furniture but at the cracks in the foundation. In the hallway, I measured the distance between the 2 screws in the wall where that big ol' mirror hangs. I remembered how you gotta lift the mirror just so to get it off the wall if your fingers are in the right spot. Out in the garage, I checked the tool cabinet to see what was gone since Klaus started helping me out. He'd taken the stud finder and the level, but he left the bolt cutters, 'cause he had no idea what they were for. In the den, I opened the desk drawer and looked at the bank statements Greta used to call her boring poetry. Nothing had been moved. Frida's a pro at visuals, not numbers, but I stuck a yellow post-it on the front of the folder anyway. Wrote in big, block letters, call Johanna. Johanna is the banker down at Cedar Point Credit Union who's always steered me right every time some salesman tried to sell me something with a name longer than its use. I didn't call her yet. Not 'cause I didn't trust myself, but 'cause a little patience is part of the plan. You gotta set the nail before you hit it with the hammer. You gotta check the wind. You gotta listen for footsteps in the hall. The footsteps came at about 10 minutes past 11 o'clock. The cleaning crew, 2 women about my age, who moved with the expert skill of people who know what dust can do to a man's life. "Will be 2 hours," one of them said. "Baseboards and blinds are included." "God bless ya," I said, and I meant it, and then I went out for a stroll on the lake path. That path and we're old friends. It's held me steady since the chemo grabbed a hold of Greta like a bad idea. It let us sit on the same bench every Thursday and just count the boats and not say anything important, and say everything at the same time. Halfway to the marina, Gunther was out by the gas dock, his head stuck under the hood of an outboard motor, cussin' in a way that was too polite to bother the seagulls. "Oscar," he hollered when he saw me. "You're a bit early for a man who sleeps like a teenager." "I'm gettin' renewed," I said. "Told you last night." "You surprised me," he said. "In a good way." He stood up straight, wiped off his hands, and squinted towards my side of the lake. "House looks busy." "You could say that," I said. I looked back at the line of trees and that little red roof that poked out like a promise. "Got a question for you. You still know a guy at Mallister and Finch, that title company?" Gunther grinned. "I know everyone," he said. "And if I don't, my cousin does." "Why?" "Just making sure the town still knows how to spell my name," I said. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. He scribbled a number on the back of an old bait receipt and handed it to me like a magic charm. "Ask for Elka," he said. "She can find a needle in a haystack." "Good," I said, slipping the paper into my wallet behind the safe deposit key. Needles have been showing up a lot lately. On my way back, I stopped at the hardware store for some batteries. Not 'cause the smoke detector needed them, but 'cause buying batteries makes a man feel steady. You walk down the aisle where all the small answers are, hooks and nails and those little felt pads for chair legs, and it reminds you that you can still fix things with your own 2 hands. I added 2 brass hasps to the basket and a padlock. Then I laughed at myself, put the padlock back, and grabbed another hasp. Locks are for people you don't know. Hasps are for doors you want to stay shut when the wind blows. I ain't afraid of the wind. I'm pretty picky about doors. Back at home, I changed the battery in the upstairs detector before anyone could tell me how much life it had left. Then I put the first hasp on the cabinet in the hall where the photo albums are. Not to keep anyone out, but to remind me that some things need a little more thought before you open them. It's the difference between a door and a boundary. People respect doors when they're locked. Boundaries, on the other hand, you gotta practice with. At 2:30, the cleaners left with a nod and a goodbye that told you they'd be back if the money was there. I made myself a sandwich and ate it standing at the sink. For 10 minutes, the house felt like it was mine again. Not because no one else was there, but because my own thoughts were louder than their echoes. I rinsed the plate, dried it, and put it away. Then I sat at the table and wrote a list because a list is a small map when the road gets foggy. Call Dr. Becker to reschedule Tuesday's checkup. Find out who signed the deposit for Oakridge. Bank confirmed beneficiaries. Check safe deposit box contents. Title office verify deed owner of record encumbrances. None. Make copies of keys for. I stopped here and didn't write the name I wanted to write. Too early. Move documents to safer places. Done. Tell no one you're making a list. I looked at that last line and just laughed out loud, which felt like sneaking a cookie before supper. Greta would have liked that. She always got a kick out of it when I got a little smug at just the right time. The door opened at 4 with the sound of people back from their errands, bags rustling, voices too cheerful. They're trying to make up for a long afternoon. I folded the list once, then twice, and slid it into the back of the old phone book we keep because someday a number in there is gonna matter again. Pops. Klaus called out. You here? In the kitchen, I said, and I put the kettle on because boiling water gives a conversation a purpose. He came in with 2 grocery bags and set them on the counter. We got you that almond milk, he said. And a few other things. Chia flax, I saw, I said. My guts are gonna be very modern. He had to smirk, despite himself. Frida came in right behind him, carrying a new set of dish towels, still in their little paper band. The kind you buy 'cause they match, not 'cause they actually soak anything up. We ran into Mother at the design center, she said. She said she has samples for the upstairs curtains. Taupe or Grega? We're leaning Grega. Grega, I repeated. Just what the English language needed, another word for what happens when you can't make up your mind and get dressed. Her smile said she'd let that one slide. She pulled out her phone. Tomorrow morning we have the home health nurse coming at 9 o'clock. For who? I asked, even though I knew the answer. I made myself ask anyway. You, she said. Don't panic. It's just an evaluation. Insurance covers it. Insurance covers a lot of things. If you move the boxes right, I said. What's she evaluating? Activities of daily living, she said, sounding proud of the words. Bathing, dressing, medication management, that sort of thing. I took a bath today, I said. I held out my wrist. Smell my soap. Mom. Hilda's voice from the doorway was too loud, like she was trying to use volume to sound brave. Can I borrow the car tomorrow at 10 o'clock? I have a study group after the nurse, Frida said automatically without even looking up. I can drive myself to a study group, Hilda said. And Grandpa can bathe without a clipboard. Klaus stepped in between them like a referee who wants the game to go his way. This isn't a debate, he said. It's a standard thing, and we need to be adults about it. Adults tell the truth, Hilda said, and her eyes flicked over to me for a split second. And that split second told me 3 things all at once. That she was on my side, that she knew silence has edges, and that she had more to say when we were alone. We are telling the truth, Klaus said. We're just trying to keep Dad safe. I put the kettle back on the burner even though it wasn't hot yet. The match hissed and then burned down small and steady. If you keep me any safer, I said, I'll stop existing. Klaus's face did that thing where it tries on a bunch of different looks to find the right one and lands on concern because anger makes for bad rules. Can we not do this right now? He asked. We've all had a day. We have, I said. And we'll have another one tomorrow. I turned off the burner and left the kettle to cool, a metaphor I knew only I would appreciate. After dinner, fish Frida baked in parchment with lemon slices, like it was a recipe photo. Helmut disappeared into his room with a nod that declared him an endangered species of politeness, and Klaus went to his office to write emails with his jaw clenched. Frida arranged a stack of catalogs on the coffee table at a 90 angle to the scented candles. Hilda caught my eye and tipped her head toward the back door. We stood out in the dark again. The lake looked rougher. The wind had picked up, and the little waves slapped against the retaining wall like small hands. There's more, she said without any fanfare. I heard a phone call with Oakridge this afternoon. Mom told them you get confused at night. She told them you left the stove on. Neither of those things is true. I told Dad he needed to fix it. He said the nurse would fill in the picture on Friday. She's coming tomorrow, I said. Hilda frowned. Mom told Oakridge on Friday. Maybe they booked 2 pictures, I said. They want to be sure I look like the man in M. I can be here, she said. I can sit at the table while the nurse is here, and I don't know, answer questions honestly. She'll ask you if your parents leave the room, I said. Not 'cause I know this nurse, but 'cause I know how systems work. If she doesn't, you can answer anyway, I said. Just don't make it a fight. Make it boring. It's a lot harder to argue with boring. Hilda let out a breath, fogging up the little patch of night between us. Okay, she said. One more favor, I said, and she straightened up like a soldier who'd been given a job instead of a lecture. If you hear anything else, times, names, or addresses, write it down. Don't trust your memory. And don't put it in your phone's notes. A piece of paper can't be taken out of a cloud with a court order. She grinned in spite of herself. You were a customs guy, she said. Once a man starts counting boxes, he never stops, I said. A car drove past on the road beyond the hedges, slow enough to be looking for a house number. We watched its headlights sweep the branches and move on. Grandpa, Hilda said, her voice small all of a sudden, like the little girl with the ladybug jar. Are you scared? Honesty is a habit. You gotta keep practicing it. Yes, I said. But not of them. I'm scared of the part of me that wants to just let it be easy. She nodded like that made a kind of sense you don't learn in school. I won't let you, she said. I touched her shoulder. I know. When I went inside, Frida was on the phone, her voice low and confident, the tone people use when they're confirming a reservation they shouldn't have made. Yes, she was saying. Tuesday at 10:15. He'll be there. Our address, sure. I didn't listen to the rest, 'cause I didn't need to. I went to the desk in the hall and took out a pen. On the calendar she'd printed and taped to the inside of the drawer, the one she'd made for my convenience, I drew a thin line through Tuesday at 10:15. Then I picked up the phone and called Dr. Becker's office. When the receptionist answered, I said, "This is Oscar Mueller. I need to reschedule my evaluation. Something came up." "We can do next Monday at 9 o'clock, she said, all business and nice at the same time. "That'll work," I said. "And please note, my daughter-in-law scheduled the last one for me. I'll be scheduling my appointments from now on." Noted. Also, I added, if anyone calls asking what we talked about, you can tell them the patient is capable of talking about it himself. "Yes, Mr. Mueller," she said, with a smile in her voice. "We can do that." I hung up and sat in the chair Greta used to sit in when she wrote letters. The lamplight pulled on the desk like honey. In the living room, Frida laughed at something her friend said, and it sounded like someone practicing a laugh for a party. I picked up the pen again and wrote another line on my list. Reschedule clinic appointment. Confirm with me. Then I did one last little thing before I went to bed, a thing no one would ever notice unless they'd lived with me for 46 years and were keeping score. I took the spare set of keys from the hook by the back door and moved them to the high shelf in the laundry room behind the jar of gooseneck screws, and I put a fresh set of spares, my spares, on the hook. They looked identical, except for a little nick at the base I'd filed myself years ago when Greta kept getting them mixed up. If Klaus borrowed the house keys tomorrow to meet a contractor, he'd have a set that worked the front and back doors, but not the side door to the garage, the one with the old Yale lock you gotta jiggle just so. It wasn't about locking anyone out, it was about remembering that I can open a door quietly when someone else thinks they're listening. In the guest room, the blanket warmed up from the heat of my legs, and the house clicked as it settled in for the night. Sleep didn't come right away, and when it did, it brought a dream where Greta and I were painting the porch, and she said, "Higher on the corners, Oscar. The corners need attention or they peel." I woke up with a clear feeling that she was talking about a lot more than just paint. At 8:57 the next morning, a white sedan pulled up in front of the house, and a woman in navy blue scrubs got out carrying a tablet. She was younger than I'd expected and older than the job requires you to be, with eyes that had seen messes and had decided to be kind anyway. Frida met her at the door with her company smile, the one that shows off the perfect row of teeth money can buy. Good morning, the nurse said. I'm Silke. I'm here for Mr. Mueller. That's my father-in-law, Frida said, and put a hand on my elbow like she was presenting a prize hog at the fair. He's been a little forgetful lately. Have I? I said and looked at Hilda behind her and caught the flicker of a grin she almost let happen. Silke's eyes went from me to Frida and back again, which is the professional way of saying, oh, I see. We'll just go through some questions, she said. Privately, if that's okay. Frida's hand tightened on my arm. Privately? Why? It's standard, Silke said, real gentle-like. People answer differently if they feel like they're being watched. Frida snatched her hand away like my elbow had just bit her. Oh. Of course. We'll be in the kitchen. Hilda tried to make herself small enough to disappear, and failed. You can stay, Hilda, Silke said, and looked at me. If you want. I want, I said. And we went to the dining room where the light is honest and the chairs creak so you can hear when someone shifts. The questions were just what I figured they'd be. What's today's date? Who's the president? Draw a clock that says 10:11. I did the tasks without any fuss and I did them right. And when she asked if I remembered to take my medications, I said yes. I lifted my pill bottle and read the label without squinting. When she asked if I'd ever left the stove on, I said, once, back in 1993, when the phone rang and my wife was telling me her mother had fallen. We ate the burned eggs and called them toast. Silke smiled. She looked at Hilda. Does he get confused at night? Hilda shook her head. He gets quiet. Do you worry about him falling? I worry about anybody falling, Hilda said. But he can do the stairs. He did them this morning to change the smoke detector battery. Silke looked at me again. Is anyone pressuring you to move to a facility? People have ideas, I said. But ideas aren't orders. She nodded and tapped her tablet and asked 2 more questions that weren't on the form but were in her eyes. Are you alone? And are you alone? I answered both by just looking at Hilda and the list in my pocket. When we were done, she stood up and shook my hand. You're oriented and independent, she said in the kind of voice a person uses when they're reading a weather report and they like the forecast. I'll send my notes to the referring clinic. Send them to me, I said. My email is. I gave it to her. And make sure they know I rescheduled for Monday. Frida was hovering in the doorway. How'd it go? She asked, like a woman who's baked a cake and wants a stranger to tell her it rose. Silke just smiled her professional smile. You'll get the report. Have a good day. After she left, the house felt like it had a new coat of paint you couldn't see. Frida messed around for about 3 minutes and then disappeared upstairs. Klaus texted from somewhere. How'd it go? I put the phone face down on the table and looked at Hilda. She let out the breath she'd been holding for an hour. You were perfect, she said. I didn't even get to tell her about the almond milk, I said. Hilda laughed for real, that laugh I've heard since she was a little girl and found the cat sleeping in the laundry basket and decided the world could have both joy and order. Grandpa, she said, getting serious. What are you going to do? Exactly what I should have done the day the tires hit the gravel, I said. I'm gonna stop reacting and start positioning myself. Like chess. Like customs, I said. Boxes and manifests. Who owns what, who says they do, and what gets caught at the border when you're not paying attention. And me, she asked. You, I said, are my radio. You keep me on the right frequency when they try to mess with the signal. She stood up straight, squared her shoulders, and saluted all wrong on purpose. I did the same. When she went upstairs to get her backpack for class, I took out the number Gunther had scribbled and dialed. Mallister and Finch, a voice said, sharp as a stapler. Elke, please, I said. And when she came on and said, "This is Elka," I said the sentence that changed the weather inside my chest. "Hi, Elka. This is Oscar Mueller. I need to verify a deed and ask a few questions about transfer options. Just, hypothetically." "Hypothetically," she said, and I could hear her smile travel down the line. "We do hypotheticals all day." "Good," I said, and I looked out the window at the lake that had watched me practice patience for years. I thought about Greta's voice telling me that corners need attention. And I thought about the scarf on the hook and the drawer with the envelope and the keys with the nick I'd filed myself. And I let the plan click into place. "Then let's talk about what happens," I said. "When people think the box is theirs just 'cause they put their hands on it first." They picked a night when the wind had died down and the house sounded like it was listening. Klaus called it a quick check-in, which is how people introduce a verdict when they want you to mistake it for a conversation. He waited until the dinner plates were washed and stacked, his idea of neutral ground, and then stood at the end of the island like a foreman about to point at blueprints. "Dad," he started, putting both palms on the counter. "We need to talk about timing." Frida stood right at his shoulder, eyes bright, hands folded like they might start clapping any second. Hilda was over by the fridge with a glass of water she hadn't touched. Helmut was there in that teenage way, leaning against the doorway, his body here but his mind somewhere else entirely. "Timing for what?" I asked, smoothing the damp dish towel over the counter even though it was already dry. "For your transition," Klaus said, and I could hear him choose that word, soft, clean, like a hospital. "Oakridge has a suite opening at the end of the week. They did us a big favor moving you to the top of the waiting list." He glanced at Frida, who nodded like a co-captain confirming a play. "We put down a deposit to hold it. The move-in is Saturday morning." There it was, a date. The thing they hadn't said out loud had finally climbed onto the table and folded its hands. I looked at the calendar on the wall that still pretended to be mine. Saturday. 4 days. "Saturday is fast," I said, even though I was counting a completely different set of numbers. "They advised it," Frida piped up. "The transition is easier when you don't let the anxiety drag out. They have a welcome orientation," she said, putting capital letters on the words. "And a new resident brunch." "Brunch?" I said, like I was really thinking about the pros and cons of eating eggs in a room full of strangers. "What time?" 10 o'clock, she said, relieved to be talking logistics. "We'll check you in at 9 o'clock. It's very streamlined." Klaus reached for a folder he'd brought from the hall table and spread out the papers like he was reading me a menu. "The suite's on the second floor, close to the elevator. It has a window that looks at a courtyard with," he scanned the page, "azaleas. The staff-to-resident ratio meets state guidelines." "Exceeds," Frida corrected. "On weekends, too." "How generous," I said. "Do they serve Dignity à la carte, or is that included?" Klaus's mouth twitched. "Dad, let's be practical," he said. "'Cause I've learned that when you hit a wall, the door always looks like a spreadsheet." "What exactly are you moving of mine?" Frida brightened up. "We made a list. 2 suitcases, 1 garment bag, your toiletries and essentials." She ticked the items off on her fingers like she was giving a recital. "The rest we've neatly boxed up in the garage for storage. If you need something, we'll bring it." I kept my face blank. Essentials decided by whom? "By common sense," she said like she'd just caught me in a trap made of logic. "We'll go through it with you," Klaus added, and I watched a shadow cross Hilda's face when he said, "with you," the way a dentist says, "with you," before making a decision for you. "We'll make it easy." "Saturday," I repeated, just to hear how the word sounded when I said it. The house ticked in the hall. The fridge hummed. Somewhere upstairs, a hanger made a tiny scrape against the closet rod. "We'll take 2 cars, Frida continued, already living in the future she wanted. "I'll ride with you. Klaus and Helmut will follow with the second load." The kids can help us carry up the boxes. Oakridge has a cart. I imagine they do, I said. We want this to be as smooth as possible, Klaus said, for everyone. There it was again. That word, everyone, a net thrown wide to make sure the fish I was didn't feel singled out. I looked at Hilda over the rim of the glass. She still hadn't taken a sip. Her knuckles were white around the water. What about Monday? I asked, making the question sound as casual as a man asking about the forecast. I rescheduled my medical evaluation for Monday morning. 9 o'clock. What evaluation? Frida asked, too fast. The one you set for Tuesday, I said, keeping my voice even. I moved it. Dr. Becker's office knows I schedule my own appointments now. The nurse Silke's report is coming to me, too. Klaus's eyes flicked to Frida and then away again. Fine, he said, his voice light. We'll drive you from Oakridge. From Oakridge, I echoed. So, I'll live there by Friday? Now it's Saturday, Frida said, pretending to misunderstand because it fit the sentence she'd already written for herself. Right, I said, and I let the sigh stay inside my ribs. Hilda set the glass down with a small, deliberate sound, like she was marking her spot in the scene. Can we slow down? She asked. This is a lot. This is what adults do, Klaus said. And I had to admire how consistent he was. He could find that line blindfolded. We plan. We anticipate needs and sometimes, I said, you anticipate the wrong ones. Frida's smile tightened just a millimeter. Oscar, I know change is hard. It's not change that's hard, I said. It's theft. Klaus pushed back from the island and straightened his tie, his way of stepping onto solid ground. Okay, he said, with that conference room tone. Let's put feelings aside and talk process. We need to inventory your belongings, sign a storage agreement, and create a contact list with Oakridge. They require a durable power of attorney on file. Our lawyer can. No, I said, and the word surprised even me with how clean it came out. We don't file anything of mine with any lawyer of yours. It's standard, he said, sounding both calming and sharp at the same time. In case of an emergency, it makes everything easier. Easier for whom? I asked. For everyone, Frida said again. I turned to Hilda. Do you ever hear a word so often it stops meaning anything? Her mouth twitched into a half-smile with teeth. Like curated, she said. Frida took a breath like she was about to climb a mountain and then changed her mind. I'm going to get the boxes, she announced. And the click of her heels on the tile was the sound of a plan trotting along. When she was out of earshot, Klaus leaned in. Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Hard is how people learn, I said. You'd know if you remembered your first bike. I remember you running behind me so I wouldn't fall. He softened, and for a second, the father I used to be saw the boy he used to be, like you see a fish flash in shallow water. This is me running behind you. Then let go, I said. He shook his head once, fast, and the flash was gone. Saturday, he said. I recognized the line they give cops in training. Say the date, say the time. Make the thing real by stamping it with language. He gathered the papers back into the folder like they were agreements we'd already signed. Hilda watched him go, then let her breath out like a tire losing air. I hate how calm you are, she said to me under her breath, which is a kind of love. Calm is how you see where the cracks are, I said. Noise hides them. We didn't argue when Frida came back with a label maker and a stack of flat boxes. We didn't fight when Klaus unfolded a tape measure and asked me the size of a life cut down to 2 suitcases and a garment bag. I let them set up their scene. I stood in it. I made notes for my own scene. While they pretended the garage was a warehouse and my things were inventory, I went to the hall desk and made the exact kind of phone call that looks like you're going along with it if you're not listening close. Hi, Oakridge, I said when a woman with a sunny voice answered on the second ring. This is Oscar Mueller. I understand I'm moving in on Saturday. I have some simple questions. I made them simple: meal times, laundry, and whether I could bring my chair. She answered with practiced warmth. I thanked her and then, as if I just remembered something small, said, and I assume visitors are allowed early mornings. She hesitated. Within reason, she said. Staffing levels fluctuate. Who are you expecting? No one, I said. Yet. I made her spell her name so I could thank her right. She told me it was Ute. I wrote it down and for good measure asked for the email address for billing. When she gave it to me, I said, and who is the deposit under? I like to put names on lines. Klaus Mueller, she said cheerfully. And Frieda Mueller, secondary. Excellent, I said. People like to be helpful when their names are on things. I hung up and added a line to my list. Deposit K&F, paper trail is theirs. Frieda spent the next hour curating. I watched her make piles, keep, store, throw out. She decided something belonged in the discard pile by saying, "This is outdated," as if time itself had just condemned it. I stepped in just once, and only once, when her hand hovered over the shoebox of Greta's letters. "Those stay," I said, and she took her hand away like the box was hot. By 8 o'clock, we had 3 neat towers of boxes in the garage with thick black Sharpie labels on the sides. I asked for the notebook. "We'll make an inventory," I said, my voice neutral, the way a clerk at a counter might say, "Next." Klaus looked surprised and then pleased because he likes a good process. I wrote every label down, contents, a rough value, notes on the condition, and then I wrote a sentence at the bottom that didn't belong in a garage and belonged there perfectly, acknowledged by, and left 2 lines for signatures. "Sign," I said. "Is this really necessary?" Frieda asked. "Only if you expect to remember what you promised." I put the pen on the edge of the notebook and waited. Klaus signed in the space that wasn't his. He always takes up more of the line than a man should, and Frieda signed with letters that looked like they came from a design school I couldn't afford. I tore the page out, gave them a copy, and slid mine into the back of a manila folder that once held a 4th grade report card that said, "Hilda applies herself, and Helmut should apply himself more." Then I put the folder on the top shelf where you'd need a step stool to reach it. Not to hide it, but to make sure it took some effort. It was late when they said the day was productive and poured themselves some wine like they'd earned it. I excused myself and did the one thing I needed to do while the house was tired and not watching. I drove to the bank. The night manager at Cedar Point Credit Union knows me by the way I walk. Even when I'm trying to be quiet, the knees give you away. Johanna wasn't there, she works days, but the desk light in the back office threw a tired rectangle on the carpet. And the young teller at the window had the attentive posture of someone who still thinks their job is to help. "Mr. Mueller," she said like she'd practiced my name for a spelling bee. "What can we do for you?" "2 things," I said. "First, I need to check my safe deposit box." She buzzed me through the door like a game show, put a key on a ribbon, and led me to the little room where people open up their lives in miniature. The box slid out with a sound like the truth. I took inventory, the title to the truck, the duplicate marriage certificate, the life insurance policy, Greta's grandmother's locket that looks like it belongs to a person who wrote letters with a fountain pen and used the word "darling" without a hint of irony. I added the new copies of the deed I'd made and the note with Elka's number. I took out an envelope of old savings bonds that had matured into an insult and decided to cash them in tomorrow just because I could. The second thing was a little more delicate. "I'd like to confirm my beneficiaries," I said, keeping my voice steady so the air didn't ripple. "On all accounts." The teller checked her screen, read the names out loud for me to confirm, and mispronounced Frieda's in a way that felt like justice. And I added a last line. "I'd also like to put a payable on death designation on the savings account ending in 3071, for my granddaughter Hilda Mueller. It won't override the others, it's just to make things a little smoother if I happen to be inconvenienced. The teller looked at me like she got what I was saying, but didn't know why I was saying it. She printed out a form. I signed where the little arrows pointed, picturing Frida's face when she finds a lot fewer levers to pull than she expected. The thought tasted like a small sweet after a meal you didn't order. When I walked outside, the parking lot was as black as a coffee without cream, and the light over the ATM was a magnet for moths, all of them banging their heads against the idea of brightness. The night had turned in that way it does. You can smell the lake from a lot farther away, and the crickets start their machine-like hum. On the drive back, I rolled the window down and let the cold air hit my face like the truth. Inside the house, the dishwasher was humming. Hilda's door was cracked open a bit. A line of lamplight cut across the hall like a bookmark. I gave a soft knock. "You up?" I asked, even though I could see she was. She lifted a corner of her blanket, and I sat in the old chair in the corner that still smelled like Greta's hand cream, almond, and some kind of flower I could never name without guessing wrong. Hilda had a textbook open and a highlighter with the cap off, not doing a thing. "Did they wear you out?" she asked. "They wear themselves out," I said. "I just move my feet." She laughed under her breath. I heard the date. "Saturday," I said. The word was a flat rock in my mouth. "We could protest," she said. I could, I don't know, chain myself to the banister. "I appreciate the drama," I said, "but I'm not sure the audience would applaud." She closed her book, chewed on the highlighter cap, then stopped, made a face, and set it down. "What are you going to do?" "Something they won't expect," I said, "which is to agree." Her eyebrows went up. "Agree?" "Not out loud," I said, smiling. "Not on the meaning, just the motion." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "If I push back now, they get to wrap themselves up in the robe of concern. They get to call me uncooperative. They get to use words like competency. If I let them march to their drum," I held up a finger, "they won't notice I'm marching to a different band." "That's sneaky," she said. "The way a person admires a good magic trick even before they approve of it." "It's administrative," I said. "The sneaky part is what they're doing and calling it care." She swung her legs over the side of the bed, her feet in wool socks. "What do you need me to do?" "Two things," I said. "One, keep listening. Not to me, to them. Write down dates, times, and names. Did you get who Ute at Oakridge reports to?" "Ute?" she said, surprised. "You called them?" "I ask polite questions until people hand me rope," I said. "Your father put the deposit in his name." "That's good," she asked. "It means the receipt lives in his pocket," I said. "And receipts have weight when you need to show who paid for the push." She nodded, like she was writing on paper in her head. "Two," she prompted. "Two is on Saturday," I said, and watched her eyes get wide, 'cause she thought she knew what I was gonna ask. "Don't ride with me. Ride with your parents. I need you to hear what they say when they think they've won," I said gently. "You can't hear it if you're listening to me breathe." Her face did something complicated and then settled into a determined look. "Okay. And if anything," I added, "feels wrong, if they go faster than they promised, if they try to take something we didn't agree to, if they talk about guardianship like it's a feature, not a bug, you text Gunther at the marina with a duck emoji." "A duck?" she repeated, baffled and delighted. "He'll call me," I said. "It's a long story that involves a sick bird in a 4th of July parade and a man named Dieter with a net." She grinned. "You're ridiculous." "Effective," I corrected. When I left her room, I stopped in the hall by the wedding photo, the one where Greta's veil had a mind of its own, and I was laughing, 'cause I was loved even with my hair. I touched the edge of the frame and felt that small static that comes when dust and glass agree to a truce. "Saturday," I told the picture, "we'll give them Saturday." Morning came with a sky the color of unwashed cotton. The house made its usual noises, the coffee pot, the cough of the furnace, but everyone moved in that slower rhythm of people who have already made a decision and only have to act it out. Klaus brought home packing tape that squealed when you pulled it. Frida organized a pile of starter linens that looked like hotel rooms trying to be homes. Helmut found his compassion long enough to carry 2 boxes to the garage without complaining. Hilda stood at the window and watched, her eyes narrowed like a scout. At 9:30, the doorbell rang. I opened it to a man in a blazer Holden, a leather portfolio and wearing a tie I knew from a local law firm's billboard. The kind of blue that makes people think you're trustworthy. "Mr. Mueller," he asked. "I'm Felix Wagner with Harrison Markham. Klaus asked me to swing by with some standard documents to simplify things as you transition." "Lovely," I said. "We love simplified things." He smiled in relief and opened his portfolio on the dining room table, laying out forms like place settings. "A general durable power of attorney," he said. "Healthcare proxy, and a simple affidavit allowing your son to act on your behalf for routine housing and financial decisions." "Routine?" I said, like the word was a cracker you could break with your fingers. Klaus showed up, hands on his hips, like a man proud of the help he'd hired. "It's standard," he said. "Everybody does it. It just makes sure we can handle things if you're busy." "Busy at brunch," I said. "At Oak Ridge." Frida stood in the doorway and did not look at Hilda, which is how you know where a person's eyes want to go. I picked up the power of attorney and read the first paragraph out loud in the same tone Greta used when we went over a warranty. "The principal hereby appoints the agent to act in the principal's name for all matters, including but not limited to financial management, real estate, banking." I set the paper down. "That's a lot of including." "It's boilerplate," Felix said. "We can add limits later." "Excellent," I said. "Then we'll add them beforehand." Klaus exhaled through his nose. "Dad, I'll have my banker review it," I said mildly. "And my counsel." "We're trying to make this easy," Klaus said. "For everyone," I said, "and let the echo sit in the middle of the table where the salt shaker usually goes." I turned to Felix. "Leave the forms. I'll read them." "We can do it now," he said brightly. "It's very straightforward." "Nothing about my life is straightforward," I said. "And when a man tells you it is, he wants you to sign it while the coffee is still hot." There was a small silence, the kind that takes on a new shape in a room, and everyone pretends not to notice. Felix gathered his professional smile and folded it up neatly. "We can follow up," he said, and handed me his card, the way a magician hands you a coin. "Call if you have questions." "I always do," I said. After he left, Klaus hovered. "That was unnecessary," he said. "Which part?" I asked. "The reading or the thinking?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "We're not the enemy," he finally settled on. "Then stop acting like my jailer," I said gently enough that he could pretend it didn't sting. The rest of the day played out like a dress rehearsal. Boxes showed up, got filled, labeled, and moved. Frida took a call from her mother in a tone that said, "Everything is on track." And at one point, I heard the words, "They'll be in by Wednesday," and I pictured the old condo emptying itself into my house like water seek in, its own level. Helmut disappeared and reappeared with a roll of bubble wrap he got from somewhere he wouldn't tell us about. Hilda went to class and came back and stood in the garage doorway, watching me take inventory while Klaus measured a happiness I couldn't see. When evening came, the 4 of us sat with takeout containers balanced on our knees, 'cause the dining room table was a staging area now, covered in papers and a tape gun and 2 Sharpies that had lost their caps. The smell of sesame oil filled the room with that particular comfort of food you didn't cook and won't be judged for. Klaus asked Helmut about his math grade. Frida told a story about a client who couldn't pick a rug. I talked about a gull at the dock that had learned how to open a wrapper with its beak. Ordinary things. You can love a person and still know when ordinary is just a cover. Before bed, I did my lap through the house, deck, den, hallway. A hand on the wall here. A turn of a knob there. The quiet song of an old lock that answers if you know its note. In the master bedroom, the red scarf hung where it should. I breathed easier than I had any right to. In the guest room, I lay on my back and watched the small square of ceiling above me, where the paint had never quite matched. Somewhere in the house, a pipe clicked. Outside, the wind had changed, and the lake sounded different, less like a friend and more like weather. I thought about Saturday. I thought about Uda's voice on the phone and Felix's perfect tie and the way Klaus said everyone, the way a pastor says, Amen. I thought about the box in the bank and the numbers on the accounts and the line on the deed with my name and no one else's. I thought about the fact that letting them move me into a place they chose, while holding a plan they didn't know about, would feel like giving up and would be anything but. When sleep finally came, it brought Greta to me the way it does when the brain is kind. She stood on the porch with a paintbrush and said, "Corners, Oscar," and then laughed because she knew she'd said it before. Morning, and the world reset to a different shade of gray. I made coffee and acted like a man who was getting ready to be moved. I let them see me fold shirts. I stood at the island and answered questions about whether I liked blue towels or white. I asked if I could bring my radio. "It's old," I said, "but it shows up for me," and I watched Frida look up whether radios are allowed, as if the world needed a policy for everything. When Klaus said he'd cancel my newspaper, 'cause they'll have one in the lobby, I smiled and said, "Leave it for now. I like to hold ink." He rolled his eyes, and that motion gave me something like joy. At 10 o'clock, I told them I needed to walk to the marina to tell Gunther I'd be gone for a few weeks. Klaus offered to drive me. I said I'd like to feel the air one more time. Frida said, "Text your location," and I said I would. Hilda met my eyes. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The plan hummed between us like a wire. On the path along the lake, I breathed in rope and leaf and a hint of gasoline from someone's small engine. The gull with the wrapper tricked me from a post like we had a deal. At the dock, Gunther looked up and said, "Saturday, huh?" 'Cause of course he'd heard. "Saturday," I said and handed him the small envelope with the matured bonds and a note. "Cash these and hold the funds in your drawer until Monday. If anyone asks you, you misplaced the envelope and found it after lunch." He slid the envelope into the space by the register where he keeps chewed pens and the spare book of stamps. "You're moving pieces," he said. "I can hear them click." "Just making sure the corners don't peel," I said. On the way back, I practiced a sentence until it sounded like something a man would say when he wanted a thing to be true. "Saturday will be fine." I said it again at the door so anyone listening would hear. And under it, another sentence kept time in my chest that no one else could hear. "Saturday will be mine." That night, Klaus called it a family meeting, final logistics. We sat where we always sit now when a decision needs drama. He handed out a printed checklist with boxes next to each item. Pack toiletries. Bring ID. Label medication. Sign intake forms. He'd highlighted lines in yellow. Frida had added notes in loops that looked like curls. Hilda took a pen and drew a small star next to, "Bring personal items that feel like home." "We'll leave at 8 o'clock, Klaus said. "Traffic's lighter then." 8 o'clock is good, I said. "I'll be ready." He searched my face for the fight he wanted to rehearse. He didn't find it. He found something else he couldn't read. It made him nervous. When the meeting ended, Hilda followed me to the back steps and said, "I'll ride with them." "Good," I said. "Listen more than you talk." "And you?" she asked. "Will you be okay?" "I've been okay," I said. And the truth of it surprised me. I just forgot what it looked like. In my room, I packed 2 suitcases. I put exactly what they expected on top: shirts, socks, the sweater Greta liked, and exactly what I needed on the bottom: copies of the deed, the inventory with their signatures, the card from Felix with today's date on it, a blank notebook, a pen that writes even if you hold it upside down, and the small leather key ring with my nicked key that opens the side door if you jiggle it just so. I set the suitcases by the door where they would find them early and feel righteous about not having to remind me. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and practiced breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. It's something they teach you at the hospital, like you didn't know how to do it already. But when the air is full of other people's plans, you have to remember how to make space for your own. Saturday, I told myself like a man names a day on a calendar because he doesn't want to call it by its other name. Saturday. And we would let their plan walk into the daylight where everyone could see it. Saturday, and I would start mine. Saturday began with the sound of tape, Klaus peeling a strip from the roll and tearing it off with his teeth. He'd printed a checklist for the morning and set it on the island under a magnet as if paper could bless a plan. I stood at the sink, finishing my coffee, and watched them move around me like a dance they'd practiced. Frida wiped a clean counter. Helmut toted the last labeled box to the garage. Hilda checked her phone, not for messages, I could tell, but for courage. "I'll pull the car around," Klaus said, too brightly. "We'll load from the side door." "I'll ride with you," Hilda told him, looking at me when she said it. She didn't wink. She didn't have to. We'd already signed that contract in the dark. "I'll go with Oscar," Frida added, grabbing my ID like she'd been the one to earn it. Less back and forth. "Sounds efficient," I said, and lifted one suitcase like an old man, so no one would resent me for being able. We made it a pageant: 2 suitcases, a garment bag, a shoebox with Greta's letters tucked where socks should be, and the small leather keyring I'd filed in 1997, sittin' innocently in my pocket. Klaus locked the front door like he was showing the neighborhood who owned it. The lake smelled cold and metallic sweet, the way it does when the wind decides to blow in the old direction. The 4 of us stood there a second longer than was necessary. One of those pauses where a family tries to feel like a family, 'cause a stranger might be watching. And then we went to our separate cars like actors heading to their marks. In the passenger seat of Frida's SUV, the dashboard glowed with the numbers of a life I didn't live: Bluetooth, navigation, unread texts. She put her hand on my forearm before she put the car in reverse. A gesture that was supposed to be tender. Practiced enough to be convincing. "You're doing the right thing," she said. "Which thing is that?" I asked. "Letting us help," she said, and drove. The town slid past, the water tower, the bakery with the good cinnamon rolls if you get there before 900, the empty lot where the hardware store used to be before it became an idea with an app. Maple Hollow sat off Route 7, a left and then a right, and then a long stretch of road that always looks like it's going somewhere better. Oak Ridge rose from a field of polite grass, 3 stories of beige ambition with a portico that made you want to straighten your tie. "Welcome," said a woman in a blazer when the automatic doors opened like scissors. She had a name badge that said Ute. I tried not to like her just because she'd told me her name on the phone. "Check-in is right this way." The lobby did everything it could to make you forget what it was. Abstract art on the walls. A piano that plays itself if no one volunteers. A bowl of green apples near a sign about hydration. A gentleman in a Cardinals cap stared at the TV with the patience of a man waiting for an answer he already knew. Somewhere behind a door, a microwave beeped and stopped. "This is my father-in-law," Frida announced, guiding me like an exhibit. "We spoke with you." She smiled like a woman who gets upgrades. "We're so happy the suite opened up." "Let's get your paperwork finalized," Ute said. "Then Silka will take you upstairs." Silka, the nurse from yesterday, looked up from a tablet when she heard her name and her face did something like relief when she recognized me. "Mr. Mueller," she said. "Good to see you again." "You, too," I said, and it meant exactly what I said. We sat at a desk where pens were chained and the calendar was always the right month. Ute ran through the script, billing, emergency contacts, community guidelines, laundry. She glanced at me when she got to the line about DPOA, the durable power of attorney. "We can put that on file when you're ready," she said carefully. "Not today," I said at the same time Klaus said, "We brought the forms." He pulled out Felix's folder like a magician revealing a dove and smiled like he'd conjured it from thin air instead of hiring it from a law office with a billboard. "Those will need to be executed with a notary," Ute said smoothly, "and reviewed by your counsel if you choose." She handed me a list of notaries in town. No rush. No rush. The two best words anyone had said in a week. Silke stood up. "Let's take a look at your suite," she said, and it sounded like an invitation, not an order. We took the elevator up, a small room with a mirror that tells the truth. Second floor. Carpet with a pattern so spills could hide. Silke opened a door with a soft click. The suite was what I expected and a little nicer than I wanted to admit, sun at the right angle. A window looking toward a courtyard where a man sat under a maple tree pretending to read yesterday's paper. A bed that looked like it had opinions about your spine. A bathroom with rails set at the exact height of humility. "We'll get you settled," Frida said, sweeping into open drawers that were already open. "Isn't this nice? It's a fresh start." "What did the old start do wrong?" I asked, running a palm over the windowsill. The paint was smooth, fresh. "Nothin' to catch a finger on." Klaus set my suitcase by the closet. "We've got orientation at 10 o'clock, he said, checking the time, not on his watch, but on the future written in his head. "Brunch after." "Of course," I said. "Wouldn't want to miss a croissant secured by a grant." Hilda looked out the window and then at me. A question flickered in her eyes. "Are you okay?" I nodded like an old oak in a manageable wind. She folded that answer and put it somewhere she could reach it. Silke showed me the call button, the thermostat, the policy about microwaves. No. The rule about candles. Hard no. And I said, "Got it, and, makes sense, in all the right places to reward a woman doing an honest job in a room that required a sturdy heart." When she got to activities, chair yoga, watercolor, and lectures about local history, Frida clapped once. "You love lectures," she said. "Oscar is a lifelong learner." "I am," I said, meeting Silke's eye. "I am going to learn a lot." We left the suite so they could argue about the best place for the lamp. In the hallway, a man with a walker came toward us, eyes down, lips moving with a prayer only he and God could hear. At the corner where the hall turned right, a voice floated up out of nowhere, raspy, familiar, full of a laugh that had broken rules and gotten away with it. "No," the voice was saying to someone on the phone, "you tell him the customs declaration is not a suggestion. He either signs it or he can eat his mangoes on the sidewalk." I stopped. 40 years had dissolved. The fluorescent lights did something they could probably be cited for. "Gustav," I said, not loud, like a man might say the name of a ghost in church. The phone snapped shut with a clap. A tall, lean figure with a gray mustache and a thrift store jacket poked his head around the corner. "Oscar," he said, one eyebrow up as if I'd lost weight and found him. Then he grinned the grin that got us out of trouble in 1984 when a supervisor thought we were the ones who'd miscounted a pallet of French doors. "Hell," he said, "it is you. I don't hug easily. Gustav does." He folded me into his arms and thumped my back with a hand that had stamped 1,000 forms. "You look good for a man being kidnapped." "I brought my blindfold," I said, and he barked what passes for a laugh when you've smoked too long and quit too late. He introduced himself to my family like he'd been assigned to them. "I'm Gustav Brenner," he said, sticking out a hand that Klaus took like it might have a trick buzzer. "Oscar and I worked customs together back when contraband kept us from being bored." "Nice to meet you," Klaus said, polite in the way of men measuring other men. "We're just getting Dad settled." Gustav's eyes took in everything at once, the way Frida stood half a step in front of me. The way Hilda hovered near a door as if she had an escape plan. The extra key in my palm. He turned back to me in the universal language of old friends. Want to walk? Let's see the courtyard, I said, which is how two men ask to be honest together without making anyone nervous. Orientation in 20, Frida warned, like a chaperone. Don't wander. We wouldn't dream, Gustav said. And then in my ear, as the elevator doors slid closed, you got a spare dream? We found a bench in the shade of a maple with leaves the color of things you should have said sooner. I didn't know you were here, I said. 8 months, he said. Came for rehab, stayed for the pudding. He stretched his long legs like a man still trying to outrun something. Daughter said I was too much for her. And I said, you have no idea. He looked at me sideways. What's your lie? My son says safety when he means space, I said. And my daughter-in-law pronounces everyone like a sentence. He whistled low. They bring your stuff. 2 suitcases, I said, and an appetite for brunch. He grinned, then got serious. How's your head? Clear, I said. Yours? He tapped his temple. Cleaner than my lungs. We sat in the kind of silence that reminds you of a long time ago. Gustav broke it the way he always did, by cutting right to the chase. You got a deed in the drawer, I said, and then corrected myself, 'cause he deserved my best. In a drawer. Different house, same truth. In your name, he asked. Yes. No life estate. No liens. No. No, no, and no. He looked at me like I'd told him a joke he could spend the rest of the week on. Oscar, he said softly, reverently. You're the owner. I am, I said, and felt Greta nod in a room with no walls. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice low and bright at the same time. Then sell it. The word sat between us like something you aren't supposed to say in a public place, and felt better for saying it. I watched a breeze lift 3 leaves and put M down somewhere new. Sell it, I repeated. Out from under their noses, he said, not proud, just factual. They moved you to make it easier to pretend. Make it harder. Make it impossible. Make it done. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a business card with curved edges like a casino chip. My nephew, he said, tapping it. Anton. Best broker in 3 counties. Fast, quiet, mean as a snake when he has to be, and kinder than a deacon when it counts. He's done situations. The word did its work without needing to be defined. He knows how to schedule showings when nobody's home. He knows inspectors who don't park their vans outside like billboards. He knows how to get you to a closing without a parade. I turned the card over. Brenner Realty. A phone number, a website, a logo of a house that didn't exist. You want me to sell my house while living at Oak Ridge? I said, as if this were the first time anyone had floated an impossible thing and felt it was reasonable. Gustav nodded. Why not? You got keys? Yes. You got a brain? Some days. You got a bank that still answers? He asked. And I thought of Johanna and the teller last night who pronounced Frida's name wrong and made it music. I nodded. Then you got everything you need, he said. Except, I said, 'cause a man who's counted boxes knows the questions that follow a good plan, a place to live. Gustav grinned. That's where you don't sell the house like a naive boy. You sell it like an old man with leverage. You write a clause that says the buyer builds you a cottage out back or gives you a life lease in a guest suite or rents you the mother-in-law for $1 a year. Rich folks like your land. They like to say they did a nice thing if it costs them nothing. Make your nice thing the cost. Who buys a house with an extra human attached? I asked. The kind of human who likes a story, Gustav said. Anton knows them. They exist. They've got money and consciences and a hunger for water views that beats both. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. In the dining room, a staff member set down a tray of glasses and made the kind of clink you can only hear if you're waiting for a miracle. "And my son?" I asked. "He'll try to contest." "Let him," Gustav said. "Your name's on the deed. Silke's report says your brain's fine. The clinic has you on Monday because you made the call yourself. The deposit at Oakridge is on his card. He's already written his name on the wrong line for you. All we need is to keep your shadow off the paper until the ink dries." He said, "We." And it held. We. Not I, not you. We. I let that sit on my tongue like a sacrament. "How?" I asked, even though I knew a little. The outline of a route had been penciled. I wanted Gustav to ink it in. "Anton will call you and say he's your nephew or your volunteer or your chess partner. Pick a noun. And that he's taking you out for community integration. That's what they call leaving the building on purpose. You and he will drive the long way so no one sees the turn signal. He'll put a for sale quietly in the places where rich people look without thinking they're looking. He'll schedule showings when Klaus is at work and Frida's labeling towels. He'll make sure inspectors come in plain vans without their names shouting off the sides. He'll bring papers to the title office Elke runs so nobody screws up a date. You'll sign here and here and here, and then we'll watch your son learn the difference between a plan and a prayer." I laughed then. It wasn't loud. It was true. "You make it sound easy." "Nothing is easy," Gustav said. "But some things are obvious." Silke appeared in the courtyard doorway with a wave that said orientation was turning a key, 10 o'clock. She called, apologetic for being on a schedule in a friendship. "We'll be there," I said. When she went inside, Gustav touched my sleeve. "Call Anton," he said. "Today. Before the brunch eggs congeal. He's got a thing at noon, but he'll pick up for me." He held out his phone. "Old. Its screen cracked. Or use mine. Your son thinks your calls are his business. My sins are still private." "I'll use mine," I said, and pulled it from my pocket like I was reaching for a cigarette in a younger decade. I dialed the number on the card. It rang twice. "Brenner Realty. Anton speaking," a voice said, bright, quick. The kind of voice that smells a closing 5 minutes before anyone else. "Anton," I said. "This is a friend of Gustav's. Name's Oscar Mueller. I need a situation handled quietly." "Do you now?" he said, and in those 3 words, I heard him take my measure and step toward me, not away. "What neighborhood?" "Cedar Point, lakefront, 2-story, wood siding, deck that outlasted 2 winters. I'm in temporary housing." I let that phrase do its work without describing the beige it sits in. "Owner of record?" he asked. "Me," I said. "Any encumbrances?" "Reverse mortgage? Life estate? Co-owners with opinions?" "No, no, and no," I said, and it felt better each time. He whistled professional appreciation. "Lovely. And your temporary situation?" "That's voluntary." "I walked in," I said. "I can walk out." He laughed. "That'll do. I'll come by this afternoon." "Would your family be home?" "Likely. And that's not advisable." "Then we'll adapt," he said. "I'm good at adapting." "Can we meet off-site? Say the garden behind Oakridge. I have a grandmother there. I pretend to visit twice a week." 20 minutes, I said. 15, he said, and hung up, 'cause men like him don't waste time saying goodbye. They'll just get the job done. Gustav slapped his knee. "You're in," he said. "And you already look 10 pounds lighter." "I feel 10 years meaner," I said. "Mean keeps you upright until kind can take over," he said. Now go let them feed you eggs and tell you about bingo. Nod where you have to. Afterwards, we'll be men again. Orientation was a PowerPoint with sofa cushions, safety, engagement, meal plans. A woman named Bridget talked us through a calendar, pointing to chair yoga like she'd invented chairs. Klaus asked about access codes to the doors as if he were considering an investor tour. Frida wrote the names of the activities in a tiny notebook, then underlined 3 and put stars next to group discussion. Hilda sat beside me and dutifully circled movie night, and then looked to see what I was circling. I drew a small box in the margin and wrote Anton at 10:45. She didn't smile. Her lip tugged up at the corner with the force of a contained sunrise. Brunch was what brunch is when a committee plans it: eggs, pastries, fruit cut into squares that tell you a knife touched it in a kitchen you don't get to see. I ate like a man who planned to be strong later. Gustav appeared beside the coffee urn like a trick. Got time, he murmured. Klaus looked up from his phone. Dad, pictures. He held the camera like a tourist. For the family chat. I let him take one. I even smiled. In the shot, you can see a man who looks resigned. Inside him is a map you can't see. Later, in the garden, Anton arrived in a charcoal jacket and the kind of jeans that say, I run, but I also sit in chairs. He shook my hand the way young men shake older men's hands when they were raised right, firm, respectful, curious. Mr. Mueller, he said, I've heard stories. I've got better ones, I said. He flipped open a tablet in a plain black case. Here's what we can do, he said. We list pocket only, no MLS. I work my list, out-of-towners, cash, high net, low drama. We do showings between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock on weekdays when your house is likely empty. We use a neutral car. We park on the side street so the neighbors don't get chatty. Inspections get booked as home services, plumbing, window cleaning, carpet, whatever fits the mood of the driveway. Contracts run through Elka at Mallister and Finch. Fast, close, 30-day occupancy for current occupants at the new owner's discretion. And we add a clause. He looked at me. For you. For me, I said. The phrase fit my mouth like a new tooth. Life lease in a detached accessory dwelling unit, he said. Colloquially, a cottage. We can call it a guest house if that makes everyone's feelings neat. New owner agrees to build permit at his cost to the square footage we specify. Timeline, 90 days from closing to CO. In the interim, they either provide you a rental at their cost or you sit tight, and they don't get to change a single screw. That part's negotiable, but I've done it. Some people get a thrill out of saying they kept the history. You'll be the history. An old man who knows the house, the lake, the weather. He smiled. And his name on the deed. Everything we do will fall into one of these, he said. Clean beats fast, but we can do both. Elka came back with a file in a printout. Here it is, she said, setting the paper on the counter like a nurse giving you good numbers. Owner of record, Oscar J. Mueller. Transfer date, June 2015. Refi recorded. No liens, no notices, taxes current. She looked up and met my eyes for the nice part. Mr. Mueller, it's you. Just you. A cord unclenched somewhere under my ribs. Good, I said, which didn't cover it, but would do. Anton tapped the page once, a drummer counting us in. Next, Elka said, if we're going to do a fast close, we'll need a title search. We can start the packet as soon as we have your signed listing agreement. She nudged a manila folder my way. I'll set you up as a client of record. That way, no one gets creative with your information. Creative? I repeated, tasting the word. We don't like creative. No, she said. We like correct. We took a small office with a window and sat at a table that had a nick in the edge where somebody had once dropped good news. Anton turned the listing agreement around so it faced me. Pocket only, he said, tapping the line as if to confirm the magic. No MLS. I marked it to my list. Standard commission. He had filled in everything conversationally. Under remarks to brokers, he wrote in plain language, do not contact current occupants. Under special conditions, he typed, buyer to agree to grant seller a lifetime lease in a newly constructed detached accessory dwelling unit, ADU, at seller's current address. Buyer to fund permits, materials, and labor. ADU specs to be agreed to in the rider. Interim housing 90 days, funded by buyer or alternative to be negotiated by parties. Rider? I asked. House rules, he said. We write ours first. I signed where Elka's little arrows told me to. Anton snapped a photo of every page and shot them to Elka's email. She confirmed with a double ding on her screen, then looked back at me. 2 other things, she said, counting on fingers. 1. Capacity. It helps when there's a note in the file that nobody can contest your ability to make decisions. She held up a palm. I'm not saying they'll try. I'm saying you'll sleep better if they can't. Silka, the Oakridge nurse, did an assessment yesterday, I said. She said she'd send a note to me. Good. Get me that. And 2, proof of funds from the buyer. We like cash. We love cash. If we can't have that, a conventional loan with a banker who answers his phone. No gimmicks. She flicked her eyes to Anton. You bring me someone who thinks an inspection is optional, and I'll put your name on the naughty list. I'm a choir boy, Anton said, and reached for his tablet like it was an instrument. Elka slid a different sheet across the table. One more thing for your side, she said to me. A simple affidavit. You confirm you're not under any guardianship. No restraining orders affecting your property. No pending divorce. She smiled a little crooked. I know that last one probably doesn't apply. It doesn't, I said. The pen felt more mine than the room. When we walked back through the lobby, a man with salt in his beard was arguing with a phone behind the counter. He looked at Elka and rolled his eyes like, can you believe the world? She smiled at him without moving her mouth. It's a skill people like her develop, triage with cheekbones. Outside, Anton exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for 10 years. That's a good office, he said. Half this job is picking the people who answer when it rings. The blue sedan smelled faintly of coffee and asphalt warmed by the sun. He pulled out onto the street, checked his mirror twice. Okay, he said, and I could hear the plan sharpening. Here's how we get into the house without waking the neighborhood. You'd at Oakridge knows I exist. I'll take you out twice this week for community integration. I'll text 30 minutes ahead so you can be waiting by the side door. We'll drive the long way in. Here's the tricky part. He glanced at me. We have to be sure nobody's home. Hilda can help, I said. Class schedule says she's on campus Tuesdays and Thursdays. Frida does floor sets at the store on Mondays and Wednesdays. Klaus has his team stand up at 10 every Tuesday like clockwork, and he eats lunch out more than he admits. Fridays, wild card. He likes to play boss at open houses. Anton grinned. You ever think of being a broker? I like my sins legal, I said. He made 3 calls in 5 minutes that sounded like he was ordering lunch but were moving gears. First, his office. Pocket out. Cedar Point. Waterfront, 2-story, lots deep. Owner's smart. Buyer must love a story. Check my list for water-starved Midwesterners who just sold something. No Instagram, email only. Tell them there's a twist in a view. Second, a guy named Lars. Need window cleaning on Thursday at 2 o'clock. Bring the van with nothing on the side. Do the sills and fog the glass so the neighbor who peeks thinks we're boring. Third, Silka. It's Anton Brenner. Quick favor. I'm taking Mr. Mueller out today and Thursday. Integrating, you know. If anyone asks, we're looking at the farmer's market. He listened, smiled. You're very good at your job. He ended the call and looked over. She'll run interference if you gets a case of the rule book. You've got allies. Keeps the floor from tilting. I said, we didn't go straight to the house. We went to the coffee shop on the corner by the hardware store that used to exist. Anton opened his tablet and turned it so I could see a list that looked like a grocery order for a very particular dinner, initial, city, and quick notes. HN, Chicago, sold family plumbing biz, looking for water and tax relief. Likes to fish. RK, Boston, retired surgeon, plays golf badly. Wants quiet. NB plus LW, Brooklyn, design firm. Want old bones, will spend for taste. These 3 will be first calls, he said. HN and RK have cash. NBLW love clauses when they can brag about them. They'll tell dinner guests about their gentleman in the garden, will they? I asked. They'll lower their voices just enough to be forgiven, he said. You'll want to meet the person who doesn't need to lower anything. We left the coffee shop just as a school bus squealed past like childhood going somewhere else. Anton checked his watch. You ready to see your own house? He asked. Ready to show it, I said. He took the back way in, parallel to the lake, past the little park with the rusted swings and the plaque about some local hero who did something nobody remembers. My heart climbed a rung and paused. At the corner, he slowed without seeming to slow. The driveway was empty. The neighbor's Subaru was where it lives when she's home, which meant she was likely inside watching a show about people making their interiors bland. No other cars. Anton drove past, turned at the next street, came around the block as if he'd forgotten something. We parked 2 houses down. He killed the engine and waited. Always give the house a full minute, he said. You'd be amazed at what you notice when you pretend you're late. In that minute, a leaf fell. A dog barked 3 times and then quit. A gull drew a line in the sky and smudged it out. Inside, my house made no sound. He looked at me. Let's move. The side door listened to the key like it had missed it. We slipped into the mudroom and stood still. The old smells, wood polish, coffee, the faint bleach of a wash load long since dried, met the new ones, lavender candles, something citrus that thinks it's professionalism. Anton's eyes moved the way a hunter's move. He reached back, handed me a pair of disposable shoe covers. For later, he whispered. We won't leave tracks. The kitchen was clean in the way a stage is clean. I touched the stove. Cold. Good. The hall desk had a shallow drawer open an inch. Inside, I could see the corner of the calendar Frida had printed for my convenience. I closed the drawer with 2 fingers. The living room had a new arrangement, the sofa angled toward the lake, as if someone were seducing a view. The mantel held the ceramic knot, and to my relief, Greta's photo was back in the place the light knew her. The stairs creaked the way they always do at the 4th step. Home teaches you its noises. We walked through the house, not like thieves, not like tourists, like men who know the value of boundaries. Anton took notes on his phone with gestures so economical you'd think he was texting a friend. Good bones. The floor is straight. A buyer won't fret about the windows. They'll want to rip the kitchen. We'll smile. In the guest room, the room they put me in, my 2 suitcases were gone. A folded list lay on the dresser. Final Saturday tasks. Anton raised an eyebrow. I slid it into my pocket. The master was half Klaus now, half argument. Greta's scarf hung red as a small shout, and someone had tucked it in on itself like they were neatening a person. I loosened it and let it drape crosswise the way it felt like her. Anton watched me and to his credit said nothing. Downstairs again, He stood in the doorway between the living room and kitchen, the spot where people decide whether a house feels like itself or like a rental. "We don't need to stage," he said. "Staging lies. We're telling a true story. The buyer we want will recognize it." He glanced at the backyard, at the corner where the lawn dips just enough to hide a foundation line. "Guest house goes there," he said. 10 paces from the deck. Orientation to the water. 2 bedrooms, 1 for living, 1 for when someone's memory comes to stay. Small porch. You'll sit in the morning shade and listen to the lake fix you. I had to swallow. "You say that like you've built it before," I said. "I've built it in my head 5 times since we got in the car," he said. "And once in real life for a veteran in showroom. He tells better jokes than I do." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Hilda. "They're at the store till 3 o'clock. Dad has a 2 o'clock call. You're clear. Also, Mom keeps saying we did the right thing, like she wants the wall to applaud." I texted back. "Good. Stay visible. You didn't hear from me. Duck if needed." She sent back the duck, then a skull, then a heart, which is how we do code now. We were heading to the back door when the neighbor's dog chose our moment to remember something and barked like it was an announcement. Anton's head turned a fraction. "We're ghosts," he said. And we were. We left the way we came. Shoe covers in a grocery bag. Silence folded behind us like careful laundry. In the car, Anton made 1 call that mattered and 3 that might. "HN," he said when the voice picked up. "It's Anton. I've got something you need to see before other people know it exists. Waterfront, legal twist that makes the story better, not worse. Can you be at Cedar Point on Thursday at 2 o'clock? Good. Wear shoes you can take off in a hurry." He hung up and grinned. He's in. He's the kind who pretends to play hard and then shows with cash because he hates being late to a story. We filled the next 90 minutes with the kind of work you can't photograph and still feel like progress. At the print shop, we pulled a copy of the inventory I'd had Klaus and Frida sign and made 3 more. At the bank, I asked for Johanna and got her voicemail. I left a message. "It's Oscar. I want to confirm pod designations and check on a temporary apartment rental. Call when you have a minute." In the car outside the bank, Anton drafted the buyer's clause in human English and sent it to Elka to translate into lawyer. She replied with a thumbs up that felt like a notarization. Back at Oak Ridge, the day staff had changed and the lobby had the soft chatter of a hotel pretending to be a neighborhood. Silka looked up from the nurse's station and lifted her chin at me in a way that read as both hello and how'd it go. I touched the brim of my cap like a man acknowledging a favor without flirting with it. She slid a sealed envelope across the desk and tapped it twice. "Assessment," she said. "Patient copy." Her smile had a side to it. "Conclusions are on the last page." I slipped it into my jacket like a secret and would wait to read it. Sometimes you save a small piece of good for when you need to remember you're not wrong. Community integration. You'd asked from behind the welcome bowl of apples, logging my trip the way a person logs a weather front. Culture, Anton said. He's a museum man. I like chairs, I said. They remind me to sit. In the suite, Frida had left a stack of towels with a note that said, "Just until you get situated." The smiley face was a dot in a circle. I sat on the bed and opened Silka's note. Oriented X3. Independent in ADLs. No observed cognitive impairment. Patient expresses a clear understanding of living options and choices. Recommends, continue independent living. Supportive Services PRN. Signature. Date. I put it with the inventory and the deed copy and the list of HN, RK, NB plus LW and felt a small constellation form under my hand. Paper can be a weapon. Paper can also be a shield. Evening brought Klaus's text. How was the day? I typed, fine. Eggs were good. He replied with a thumbs up and a calendar link to Monday's evaluation, unaware I'd already moved it. I added a duck to the calendar at 9 and laughed into my sleeve. Sleep came easier that night, not because I liked beige or policy, but because I could feel the plan humming under the floor like a well-behaved furnace. In the morning, I woke to the soft chorus of early carts rolling, a radio somewhere playing a song nobody under 50 admits to liking. I dressed in the sweater Greta liked and walked down the hall. Gustav was leaning in a doorway telling a story to a man who had stopped listening 10 years ago and still pretended beautifully. "You look taller," Gustav said when he saw me. I stood up, I said. "Good," he said. Anton said, "Thursday," he did. 2 o'clock, "I'll say a prayer for the plumbing," he said. And when I raised an eyebrow, he added, "So the neighbor with opinions hears the right noise at the right time." At 10:30, my phone buzzed. RK confirmed for Friday. Fern. Anton wrote, "Bring your owner voice. Then also tell Hilda to steer Mom away on Thursday afternoon between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. Window cleaning booked, van unmarked, squeegees will sing." I sent Hilda a message that looked like nothing, and she sent me back an emoji of a window and a woman running. We communicate like spies and grandchildren do, half code, half love. The day before the first showing, I told Klaus I needed a sweater from the house. He offered to have Frida bring it. I said I wanted to see the lake. He hesitated, then like a generous king, granted the audience. "We'll swing by on our way to Costco," he said. 15 minutes. The drive felt shorter now that I'd been there without them. The house looked both the same and like a photograph someone else had taken. I walked in, said hello to the walls so my nerves wouldn't be rude, and went to the guest room. The sweater was where they'd placed it, as if arrangements were kindness. I held it to my chest a second longer than necessary. In the kitchen, Frida was fussing with a bowl of lemons because that's what catalogs put on islands when they don't know what else goes there. "Do you like your sweet?" she asked. "It has a window," I said. "It knows which way is east." "That's good," she said. "It'll help your mood." I wanted to tell her my mood has weathered, but did not. Instead, I looked at Klaus, who was scrolling his phone as if consulting a sacred text. "Thursday, we have window cleaning scheduled," I said casually. 2 o'clock, Lars' window. He waved a hand. Yeah, he said. Frida said they booked something. "I'll be in the office." "Good," I said. They like it when homeowners aren't underfoot. Back at Oak Ridge, I lay out my clothes for Thursday like I was packing for a small important trip. Good shoes with quiet soles. A jacket with pockets that keep paper where paper belongs. A cap with the bait shop logo. At noon, Johanna called from the bank. "Mr. Mueller," she said, cheerful and unafraid. "I got your message. Pods are set as you requested last time. If you'd like to add." "Everything's fine," I said. "One more request. If anyone other than me calls asking about balances, tell them it's policy to say words only to me." "That is in fact policy," she said, "and also my preference." And, I added, hypothetically, if I needed a short-term rental for 90 days while a guest house is being built, high floor, elevator, no stairs, could you point me? "I can do more than point," she said. "I can place. I'll email options by the end of the day." "Thank you," I said. "I'd like to spend money in a place that doesn't make me feel like a misplaced piece of furniture." She laughed. "We have a building on Lakeside with decent bones. You'll like the neighbors. They mind their own business and bring casseroles unannounced. It's an odd balance I've come to admire." I hung up and looked at the growing pile of papers in my drawer, its spine straight now. I thought of Greta. She liked odds and ends, things that didn't seem to belong together until she put them on a shelf and made them make sense. "You'd like this," I told her softly. "The making use of what's at hand. Thursday arrived with a sky that couldn't decide between sun and cloud. Anton texted at 1:40, on my way. Windows singers on site. I met him at the side door without looking like I was meeting anyone. Just a man stepping out to breathe. We drove 2 blocks in silence because some plans don't like being spoken about when they're almost ready. At 1:58, we turned onto Blue Heron Lane. Lars's van sat in the driveway, blank white with a ladder on top. No logo. Nothing to invite the curious. 2 men moved in and out with buckets and squeegees that made a low, clean sound against the glass. The house looked like it was getting ready for a photograph. Anton parked on the side street and we walked the rest. "HN will be 2 minutes early," he said. "People with money hate to be behind." He was right. A rental Audi pulled up at precisely 1:59, and a man in his early 60s got out, wearing a jacket that said, "Expensive," and a face that said, "This better be worth it." He held out a hand. "Gunther Novak," he said. "Chicago." "Oscar," I said. "House." Anton smiled with just his teeth and unlocked the door. "Welcome," he said. "Please remove your shoes. The floors are original. They've earned it." Gunther walked like a person who has ranked rooms his whole life and likes grading. "View's good," he said in the living room, which is like saying air's breathable. "In the kitchen," he said, "tear this." "In the dining room," he said, "we'll make this a bar." On the deck, he said nothing for a long moment, and then something softened in his shoulders. "Okay," he said almost to himself. "Okay. And the clause?" Anton said as if he were asking a man to pass the salt. "Life lease, detached ADU, 90 days interim with buyer-funded rental." Gunther's mouth did a tight thing. "I've done stranger," he said. "I had a place in Duke County with a caretaker who lived above the boathouse. He died there. Old people have a right to stay where the water knows them." He looked at me. "Can you fish?" "I can hold a pole without making it a metaphor," I said. He laughed, surprised. "Good," he said. "I hate metaphors." He turned to Anton. "Price." Anton named a number that made me feel briefly dizzy and then weirdly calm. Gunther didn't flinch. "Inspection." "You'll get one," Anton said. "Just don't bring a truck with your name on it." Gunther nodded. His phone buzzed. He glanced, ignored it. "I'll send proof of funds by 5 o'clock, he said. "Draft me terms by the end of the day. If I like them, I'll sign tomorrow. I have a plane on Sunday." He put his shoes back on and before he opened the door turned to me. "My father lived in the same house for 57 years, he said. My brother bulldozed it after he died. Put up a box with gray siding. I don't go back there. I hate gray." He cleared his throat like he'd said too much. "I like the red scarf." "So did my wife," I said. We watched his Audi slide away like money does when it's got a job. Anton didn't say anything for a beat and then he said, "He's our guy." "Because of the scarf?" I asked. "Because he hates gray," Anton said. "And because his POF sings louder." At 3:07, after the squeegee men had sung their last note and left, we stood in the living room alone and looked at the water as if it were a jury. My phone buzzed. A new email from Johanna. Lakeside Tower Unit 7B. Available. October 1st. Deck. Elevator. No thresholds. Attached photos. Also, your bonds cashed. Funds are on hold. Let me know where to direct. Another buzz. An email from Gunther Novak's assistant with a PDF titled POF. Proof of funds. The numbers had too many digits to feel like mine. Another buzz. Elka, brief as a heartbeat. Got POF. Drafting writer now. Capacity letter received. Monday evaluation noted. Keep your pen warm. Anton clapped his hands once, a small happy sound. We're on rails, he said. We left by the side door again. Left the house to its afternoon. Left only the faintest trace of lemon and old wood and two men who had decided to be reasonable in a dangerous way. In the car heading back toward Oakridge, Anton glanced at me and then back at the road. You okay? He asked. I'm something better, I said. What's that? Engaged? I said. Not with a place, with a decision. Back at the facility, the lobby had traded out Ute for a teenager with a lanyard and a hopeful posture. I nodded at him like he'd greeted me and went upstairs. In my drawer, I put the papers in order: deed, inventory, assessment, POF email, printout, Elka's message, Johanna's options. In the mirror, I looked more like a man you'd believe. Maybe it was the sweater. Maybe it was the paper. That evening, Hilda called. How'd it go? She asked, trying to tuck the thrill back into her voice. Picture a man who hates gray, I said. She laughed like a kettle boiling. I love him already, don't I? She said. Not yet. But root for him. I am, she said. Also, Dad told Mom they can relax now that you're settled. She snorted. He thinks settled is a verb you do to other people. It often is, I said. But not today. Grandpa, she said softer. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us, I said. Now, get some sleep. Tomorrow we practice being boring again. Boring is my superpower, she said. I hung up, turned off the lamp, and lay in the almost dark. The hum in the wall sounded like a faraway boat, the steady kind with a motor that's seen more water than roads. Somewhere a cart squeaked and then didn't. The bed felt less like somebody else's idea. I thought of the house, of the corner where the guest house would go, of the porch where I'd sit and count gulls and forget things on purpose. I thought of Klaus and Frida and the word everyone. I thought of balance, that old stubborn middle no one writes songs about and everyone needs. I thought of Greta telling me corners need attention or they peel. I fell asleep naming corners. And when the morning came for the first time since the tires crunched our gravel, I woke before the clock and knew exactly what the day was for. They say good news arrives quietly. But that morning it knocked, 2 raps on my sweet door, quick and polite. I opened it to find a slim man in a charcoal jacket holding a flat envelope like a waiter who's not supposed to touch the plate. From the front desk, he said. For Mr. Mueller. The name badge said Soren. He had that early shift calm some people are born with. Thanks, Soren. He smiled and carried his stillness down the hall. I closed the door and slid a thumb under the flap. Inside, 2 pages clipped together and a yellow sticky from Elka. Her tidy, triangular handwriting, POF received. Writer drafted. Buyer is serious. Keep your pen warm. Under it, a printout. Proof of funds. G. Novak Holdings, with numbers I would never say out loud in a grocery store. Beneath that, page 1 of the writer Anton had promised, in plain English. First, no legalese until the last paragraph. Buyer agrees to construct a detached accessory dwelling unit, guest house, for seller to specs attached within 90 days of closing. Buyer funds permits and build. Interim housing funded by buyer, see Exhibit C. The word sat there with the calm of furniture that isn't moving. My phone vibrated the way a bird taps a window. A text from Anton. Gunther's counsel is clean. He'll sign tonight if we don't give him a reason not to. RK still wants Friday at 1 o'clock. We play both until one blinks. I was pulling on my sweater when another message arrived. Hilda, Dad's meeting moved home. 1 to 2 o'clock, then out. Mom at the store till 3:30. Nathan at robotics. Thursday's window thing made her happy. You're clear Friday 1 o'clock to 2:30. Then, because she can't help herself, a duck. I pocketed the rider, folded Elka's note into my wallet alongside the safe deposit key, and headed for the elevator. The Oakridge lobby was doing its morning impression of a small airport, wheelchairs taxiing, a volunteer with a cart of paperbacks, you'd explaining community engagement to a son who looked like he hadn't slept much since his mother forgot his name. I waved and walked out into the cold that wakes a man up the rest of the way. Anton's blue sedan slid to the curb. He kept the engine running, leaned across, and popped the lock. "Morning, Mr. Mueller." "Morning," I said, handing him the envelope. "Elka says we're warming the pen." He scanned the rider while easing us into traffic. "She's good," he murmured, then nodded once to himself. "We anchor with Gunther. We keep RK on the line until Gunther lands. If Gunther stumbles, RK pays to be second." "You ever juggle with real oranges?" I asked. "I did when I was 12, he said. "A man learns not to bruise fruit he plans to sell." We didn't go home first. We went to the bank because there are days when you begin with paper to remind yourself who signs it. Johanna met me at her desk with a folder already open to the page that mattered. "Unit 7B at Lakeside Tower is ours if you want it," she said, tapping the photo of a bright room with windows that didn't lie. "Elevator, wide doorways, no thresholds. The building manager will hold a 3-month lease if you wire the deposit today and your bonds posted funds available." "Send the deposit," I said, and put the lease in my name. "It always was," she said, and that small sentence went into the drawer in my chest where I keep the good kind of surprises. In the car, Anton dialed Elka. "Drafts in our hands," he said. "I'd like a clean purchase agreement for review by 4 o'clock. We'll hold RK at 1 o'clock tomorrow. If Gunther signs first, we cancel RK with a property under contract call that still leaves them favorably disposed when their golf buddy asks who found them a lake place and they say my name." "Shameless," I said when he hung up. "Precise," he said, and pulled onto the 2-lane that hugs the water like a dog that knows the couch rules. At 12:45, the side street near Blue Heron Lane was empty. The house looked innocent, which is how a house looks when it's about to change hands. Anton parked 2 doors down again. "We give it a minute," he said. And we did. A leaf cart clattered by behind a city truck's seasonal maintenance. The neighbor's Subaru was gone. The only noise was the lake pressing a soft shoulder to shore. We moved. The key turned like it was relieved to be in the right hand. Inside, the kitchen smelled like lemon again and a little like cereal. Anton did a quick sweep with his eyes. He had learned, stove off, table clear. No jackets on chairs, no detritus that says somebody just left for 10 minutes. Satisfied, he took the shoe basket to the door and set it where a conscientious man would see it first. At 12:59, a silver sedan pulled up and a man with a surgeon's posture stepped out. He was in his late 60s, crisp and unhurried, the kind of man who wears a watch he winds himself. "Emil Koenig," he said, shaking my hand and then to Anton. We spoke. "You said quiet and straightforward, both. And a stipulation that keeps the history attached in the right way," Anton said. We walked through the rooms. Emil touched things the way a doctor touches ribs, assessing without trying to change them. "You've kept the wood," he said in the living room, approving and a little surprised. "In the kitchen, we can fix this." On the deck, he stopped like all the men stop and looked at the water, the way someone looks at a painting that might have been made for him. "Close," he said. "You hear the wind in the right key here." "And the guest house," Anton said, letting the word be what it is. "Detached, life lease, buyer funds build, 90 days interim." Emil considered, then nodded once. "I trained with a man who used to say, your duty is to whoever's on the table in front of you. If this house is the patient, you don't amputate a history to get it a view." He looked at me. "Where do you want the cottage?" "Back corner," I said, pointing. 10 paces off the deck, porch toward the morning. Big enough for 2 chairs and a stubborn friend. He smiled with his eyes. I can live with that. Price? Anton named the same number he'd named Gunther. Emil did not flinch. He did not smile. He looked at the lake again. I'll have my banker send proof by 6, he said. But if you get a clean offer before mine, take it. I don't want a bidding war. I want to start unpacking in peace. There's more than one way to win, Anton said. And only one way to sleep, Emil replied. He put his shoes on, shook my hand again. His grip was warm and dry. A man who's held hands in worse rooms. You have someone who cares about you, he said, glancing at the photo of Greta returning the sunlight on the mantel. Make sure the clause protects them, not just you. I plan to, I said. He left quietly like he'd never been. Anton watched the silver sedan pull away. He's a yes if Gunther somehow turns stupid, he said. But Gunther won't. Because of the scarf? I asked again, smiling despite myself. Because he hates grey, Anton said, grinning. And because his POF sings louder. We locked up and drifted away like we'd only come to borrow the light. Back at Oakridge, my phone showed 3 new messages stacked like pancakes. First from Elka, agreement attached. Review P4 ADU spec, P7 interim housing, P11 occupancy for current occupants 30 days. No surprises. Second from Johanna, lease approved. Keys available Monday. Unit 7B will be cleaned on Saturday. I left a basket in the fridge because that's who I am. Third from Ute, welcome social this Saturday at 4 o'clock. Bring your favorite story. I stared at the last one, the way you look at a polite invitation to a place you plan to leave. Before I could answer any, the sweet phone rang, the landline Oakridge installed to make children feel reassured. Mr. Mueller. Uta's voice, cheerful. Your daughter-in-law dropped off some extra toiletries and a calendar of family birthdays for you. And Klaus left a note. Thanks, I said. Could you put them in my drawer? I will, she said. See you at 4 o'clock on Saturday. I wouldn't miss it, I said, and set the phone down like it might judge my tone. At 3 o'clock, Anton texted. Gunther's counsel, marked up nothing. He wants to sign at 7 o'clock tonight. Elka can notarize. You good to make a little evening field trip? I was about to answer when another sound cut across my plans. The muffled trill of my cell, Hilda's ringtone. 2 notes from one of those songs she insists I like. I answered. Kiddo, change of weather, she whispered. Dad just found a business card on the hall table. Mallister and Finch. He asked Mom if she had called them. She said, no, he's alert, I said. Which is the sound of a man finding a map in a maze he thought was his own. You wanna come see where a geezer hangs his hat when he's being a pain in the ass? I said into the phone. I'm already in the lot, she told me. Hilda showed up with a sack of groceries that wasn't college fare, stuff like leafy greens that needed a good rinse, actual coffee beans, and a chunk of fancy cheese wrapped up in waxed paper instead of that cheap plastic. She put it all away in the fridge like she was practicing a job she'd watched a pro do. This place smells like a real home, not a holding cell, she said. I told her that was probably the best compliment anyone had given me. She went over to the window and stared out, the way you do when you're letting the skyline patch up a broken part of you. I can come by every 3rd Saturday, she offered. We can make some food and chew the fat about nothing important. The unimportant stuff is always the most important, I said. Her phone buzzed, and she peeked at it. Mom wants me back. They're trying to figure something out. Means there's a whiteboard and a brawl, I said. Don't jump in the middle of it. Let the big kids bust their toys, then just grab what you need from the wreckage. She gave me a smile that didn't have much humor in it. You're better at this than I gave you credit for last week. That's just because I remembered how, I said. When she left, she gave me a hug at the door that had the confident feel of someone who knows exactly which side they're on. After she was gone, I put my shirts on the hangers, shoved my shoes under the bed, and put my wife's picture on the windowsill. The light hit it just right, like it had been waiting for its spot the whole time. Tuesday, the architect showed up at 10 o'clock, a woman in her late 50s with a notebook and boots that looked like they'd seen a whole lot of mud. "Helga and Heidi," she said, shaking my hand in the yard as if we were relatives at a family reunion. "Gunther tells me you care about where the morning goes." She turned her face toward the lake and closed her eyes for a beat. "You're right. It goes there." We walked the grass together, 12 yards off the deck, then 7 more. Helga took out a pencil and drew a box in the air. "No threshold," she said. "We keep the porch low and give it a long step instead of a short one. 2 bedrooms, one you'll pretend is a study and then admit is for naps. Bath with a walk-in shower. A bench that doesn't wobble. Kitchen with counters at a height that doesn't make you bend like an apology. Windows that hug the view but don't glare. Can we make the porch deep enough for summer rain?" I asked. "I want to sit outside when the weather makes decisions." She grinned. "We can give the roof a smile," she said. "And we'll angle it to hear the rain the way God meant." Gunther joined us with coffee and a confidence I was starting to trust. He deferred to Helga where a man should. He asked questions about where a man could be useful. He didn't pretend to have ideas when the ideas had already walked into the yard and asked to be seen. We went inside briefly so Helga could take the measure of where stories had lived. In the hallway, we passed Frida and Beat sorting linens into piles that meant organization to them and surrender to me. Frida looked up, saw Helga's notebook, and stepped backward like the future had entered the house without knocking. "We have 45 days, she said as if Helga needed the calendar announced to continue existing. "You do," Helga said evenly. "I won't begin until you're gone." Beat sniffed. "A guest house," she said with the tone people use when they mean outhouse. "A home that fits its owner," Helga corrected. "Not everyone needs stairs to feel important." Gunther sipped his coffee. "We'll bring cookies when he moves in," he said. "You'll drop them off. You'll like it. It will feel human." In the backyard again, Helga staked the corners with string and a brightness that made the grass look ready. "We can pull permits this week," she said. "The county likes our drawings and hates delays. If the weather behaves, we break ground in 2 weeks. 7 weeks to frame, 3 to finish." She tilted her head. "I'll get you in by Christmas if nobody tries to name the cottage after themselves." "I won't allow a plaque," I said. "If this place has a name, it's Porch." Gunther laughed, pleased. "Done," he said. "Porch it is." That afternoon, Johanna called to confirm the auto debit for the lease and to ask if I liked the honey. "It's from a beekeeper on the North Road," she said, which is the sort of detail that makes a banker feel like family. I thanked her and asked about setting up a small trust for Hilda for when she steps off their whiteboard and into her next chapter. "Education or first apartment expenses," I said. "Nothing that lets anyone else put their hands on it." "We can do that," she said. "We'll make it so the only gatekeeper is time." Wednesday, Gustav showed up at Lakeside with a bag of hardware store things nobody thinks to bring to a temporary place. Felt pads for chair legs, command hooks, a power strip, and a tiny level. "You're staying long enough not to scrape a floor," he said. "You're a romantic," I said. "I'm a man who hates replacement charges," he replied, adhering felt to the feet of the chair like a surgeon dressing a wound. Then softer, "You did good, Oscar." "I had help," I said. He tipped his chin. "Some of it was me. Most of it was you remembering how to move in straight lines." On Thursday, a not at all small thing happened that I almost missed because the day had the color of chores. Hilda called in the evening and said, I signed up for an internship at the title office. "What?" I sat straighter without meaning to. Elka posted a flyer at the college. They need someone to scan and organize property cards. And she said she likes how I write dates on forms. She took a breath. I told Mom I wanted to pad my resume. She thinks it's for law school. It's not. What is it for? I asked. For learning where the lines are, she said. I want to know how paper decides who gets to live where. I didn't say I was proud. I said, you'll see how boring wins. And she laughed because she already had. The days started to hold a rhythm that didn't depend on anyone else's calendar. Mornings at Lakeside, I made coffee, buttered toast, sat with Greta's picture, and let the lake tell me what time it was. Midday, I walked. The air had a bite to it that meant winter was coming. People nodded in the way of neighbors who respect your privacy and will still bring you a casserole when the power goes out. Evenings, I watched a show with a plot you could see coming and didn't mind. I slept the kind of sleep that doesn't argue with itself. On the 13th day after the closing, something broke and something mended. Frida called not to recalculate or to pivot, but to ask for a favor. Oscar, she said, voice flat with the fatigue of people who have been in kitchens with boxes and grandparents who think they are throwing history away one plate at a time. Do you want the red scarf? It was on the floor. I don't know. I think Beat tried to tidy. I pictured her bending to pick it up and not knowing how to hold it. Keep it on the hook, I said. I like that it watches the house leave and come back. She didn't argue. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Later that same day, Gunther texted a photo, the yard pulled up in neat squares of sodding, lines drawn like music staves. A small orange excavator waiting. Tomorrow, he wrote, we break ground. I stood on my small balcony in Unit 7B with my hands in my pockets and watched the water wring itself and relax. My phone buzzed again. Klaus this time. I hesitated and then answered. Dad, he said without armor. We signed a lease. Birch Street. It's smaller than she wanted and nicer than I deserve. We can afford it. Good, I said, surprised by the way my chest loosened. How are the kids? Jonas is thriving, he said, almost laughing. He wired the router without cursing once. Hilda, she's fine, I said. We talk. I figured. He cleared his throat. Look, I'm angry. I'm embarrassed. I think you know that. But I also can't pretend I didn't make this happen by the way I did things. I thought I was protecting you. And what I was protecting was the story I'd written in my head for after you were gone. He let the sentence sit between us without asking me to clean it. I leaned on the rail and stared at a gull who had decided to ride the air instead of working. It's a decent story, I said. It just didn't include me. Silence. Then, will you let me help with the guest house? He asked a question from a boy in a man's suit. Yes, I said. Carry lumber. Hold a board. Stand in the yard and say the porch looks like it remembers us. I smiled into the wind. You can help with that. We hung up before we ruined it with an apology. Friday came with the sound of a machine. I like an engine that knows exactly what its job is. I walked to the edge of Gunther's yard and watched Helga and her crew chalk lines, check levels, and dig a hole exactly where a porch would keep a man company. Gunther handed me a hard hat, and I put it on, not because I needed it, but because sometimes you honor a process by wearing what it asks you to. Feels like a ceremony, I said. It is, Helga replied, eyes on her crew. We're putting foundations where memory will sit. You talk like Greta, I said. Then she was right, she said, and didn't wait for me to explain. In the early afternoon, a city inspector came by with a clipboard and a pen he was proud of. He walked around, measured a thing or two, and nodded. You folks did your homework, he said. I like when plans look like they want to be built. We made sure, Helga said. We laid the corners first. By the following Tuesday, forms were set, rebar laid, and gravel tamped. Helga asked me to pick the stain for the porch boards. She held out 3 samples like a test. Left, I said without squinting. It looks like morning. Left it is, she said. You know you're light. That afternoon, Hilda arrived in a blazer that tried to be serious and succeeded just enough. Elka says I staple like a person who knows where to put lines, she reported. I'm learning that nothing is real until it's on paper. It was always thus, I said. People just forgot and tried to make it true with noise. She stood with me at the edge of the new rectangle and squinted as if the structure were already there, which is half of the building. Can you see it? She asked. I can, I said. 2 chairs under a roof that listens. She looped her arm through mine, and we watched a man pour clean lines of concrete the way cake batter fills a pan. The air smelled like sand and a future that knows its weight. That night back in 7B, I sat at the small table with Johanna's honey on toast and wrote 3 thank you notes by hand. One to Elka for knowing what day it is when other people pretend not to. One to Silka for telling the truth in a room that pays for fear. One to Ute for your clipboard and your help even if we made you crazy with our coming and going. I put stamps on and felt the pleasure of sending a thing and knowing it would arrive. If there was a twist in that week, and there always is, it came quietly. On Thursday, a letter arrived addressed to me at Lakeside, forwarded from the house. It was from Oakridge's billing department. Notice of deposit refund. A check clipped to the bottom, payable to Klaus because he'd written the first one. A sticky note in a different hand. Per the residence capacity letter, deposit refunded to original cardholder. Please redirect per the residence instruction if needed. I brought it to the front desk and stood there long enough for you to look up. Can I ask that we reissue this to me? I asked. She glanced down, read without moving her eyes. You can, she said. And we will. She wrote a new note, stapled it to the old one, and looked back at me. You know, Mr. Mueller, most of my job is keeping track of names next to dates. It's not glamorous, but it's satisfying when they line up. Boring wins, I said. Always, she said. But don't tell my boss. By Saturday, the footings had cured and the outline looked like a home. Klaus showed up in work boots he hadn't worn in 6 years and stood next to me like we were the kind of people who figure things out with a level and a beer. He picked up a 2x6 and held it steady while Helga checked the angle. Looks right, she said. He grinned without meaning to. I can be useful, he said. You always could, I said. We worked a few hours in the kind of silence that includes everything. Frida came by once with iced tea and set it down without adding comments about angles or color. She watched the yard turn into purpose and for the first time since she arrived with a half-dozen suitcases, didn't try to name that purpose for me. Beat and Kurt stayed away, which felt like a mercy. When the crew broke for the day, Helga rolled up her plans and looked at me the way a person looks when they like their job and the client didn't ruin it. We'll frame next week, she said. You'll see the bones. I like bones, I said. They tell the truth even when you put paint on them. Gunther clapped dust off his hands and nodded toward the house. Want to walk through? He asked. Inside, the living room had that end-of-day quiet that comes when they've accomplished something invisible. Klaus looked around like he was seeing it for the first time, not as an inheritance, but as architecture. He touched the mantel and didn't move Greta's photo. We'll pack the rest, he said softly. We'll leave it better than we found it. That's all I asked, I said as the light faded and we stood on the deck that was still mine in a way no paper can contradict. Hilda came up the steps with Jonas in her wake. He was carrying a small, battered box. What's that? I asked. He looked sheepish and proud. Your records, he said. I found them in the garage behind Mom's seasonal decor. I I thought you'd want them. He glanced at his father. I didn't ask. Klaus didn't scold him. He smiled in a way I recognized with relief. Good instinct, he said. I took the box, lifted the lid, and saw spines I knew by heart. Miles, Ella, a Goodman concert that sounds like summer. I ran a finger along a sleeve and felt dust and history. Thank you, I said to a boy becoming a man. You just made the porch a better room. We stood there, me with my records, Klaus with dust on his jacket, Hilda with a grin she didn't try to hide, Jonas with the satisfaction that comes from finding the right object at the right time. And the lake pushed a small wind across our faces like a blessing. On the walk back to Lakeside, I realized the story that began with tires on gravel had found a new sound. Hammers measuring distance. A saw pausing at a noise, not a laugh. The right moment's paper that doesn't crinkle because it sits where it should. I carried the box under my arm and thought of Greta's line about corners, and for the first time, I understood it as a whole life, not a paint job. If you decide where the corners are, the walls will follow. That night, I slid a record out of its sleeve with the care of a ritual, and set it on a small turntable Hilda had smuggled from a consignment shop. The needle found what it was looking for. The room filled with a trumpet that had learned to apologize without stopping being itself. I sat, closed my eyes, and let the old song lie over new air. The hook, if you need one, was simple, I was home even while my home was being built. The red paper was the first thing I saw flapping on a sawhorse like a tongue that meant trouble. Stop work. Bold. Municipal. Self-assured. It was taped at an angle that said, whoever put it there wanted it seen before the coffee hit my blood. Helga was already in the yard with her hands on her hips and a roll of plans under her arm. Gunther stood beside her, jaw set the way a man stands when he's seen storms try to impress him. A white city sedan idled at the curb, hazard lights blinking like a heartbeat you don't trust. What's the story? I asked, voice steady. My boots made small, honest noises in the grass. Anonymous complaint, Helga said, not rolling her eyes because professionals don't do that where clipboards can see. Alleged setback encroachment and possible wetland disturbance. We comply with both. She tapped the plans. We staked to the inch. The soil here has been disturbed for 60 years. This is lawn, not habitat. The inspector was new, early 30s, eager to do a good job in a shirt one size too big. He held a tablet like a shield. Mr. Mueller, Ms. Nguyen, sir. He nodded at Gunther, not sure where to put him. I had to post a stop order pending review. Policy. Policy keeps buildings standing, Helga said evenly. We like policy. What we don't like are games. Who complained? He glanced at his screen, then away. It's marked anonymous. Gunther flicked his eyes toward Blue Heron Lane. Not the Osprey, he said under his breath. I didn't ask how he knew what I was thinking. The neighbor's Subaru sat in its usual spot, curtains barely moved. Beat, if I had to bet, would show up later, powdered and offended by physics. Anonymous covers a multitude of familiar faces. Can we appeal today? I asked. Already did, Helga said. I called Ingrid at planning. We have our survey, our staking photos, and the inspector's notes from last week. She'll send a senior out by noon. If they've got a map, we've got the ground. The young inspector shifted, wanting to be liked by the right people and not sure yet who they were. I'm sorry, he said. I had to post it. You did your job, I said. We'll do ours. While we waited for noon, the yard felt like a theater between acts. The crew stood with their hands in their pockets, boots scuffing dirt they'd compacted with pride. The forms sat patiently. The hole for the pier footings was covered with plywood, like a secret you intend to reveal properly. At 11:50, Hilda came skidding up the side path in flats not meant for yards and a lanyard with Elka's office printed on it. Her hair was pulled back like people who file things do when it's time to see where the lines are. She took one look at the stop notice and inhaled. "Before you say anything," I said, "we're good. Helga's called in the cavalry." "I brought cavalry," she said, surprising me. She held up a manila envelope like a secret identity. "Two things. 1. Ingrid's office received 4 complaints, all from the same anonymous email created last night. Elka called a friend and they pinged the IP. It's coming from a laptop at the public library on Spruce Street." "Convenient," Gunther said. "Half the trouble in this town has a library card." 2, she continued, lowering her voice. "Elka wanted me to hand this to you, not email it." She pulled out a copy of a petition with a judge's stamp so fresh the toner probably still smelled warm. "In guardianship of Oscar J. Mueller, hearing set for 3 weeks from Thursday. Petitioner, Frida P. Mueller. Affidavit attached. Beat and Kurt Pollack." "I see," I said, which is what a person says when the ground shifts exactly where you predicted it would. Hilda swallowed. "They filed it the day after the welcome social. She said an ex parte request for temporary guardianship was denied because of Dr. Satt's letter, but there's still a hearing. They claimed, pattern of impaired judgment and susceptibility to undue influence. There's even a line about uncharacteristic financial decisions, the sale." Helga lifted her chin. "Paper is how people who don't have hammers try to knock down walls," she said. "I guess we'll show paper back," I said, taking the petition. It looked official and thin at the same time. I slid it into my folder and felt the weight change. At 11:50, a different city car rolled up. Ingrid herself stepped out, early 60s, flats that have seen 1,000 sidewalks, hair in a practical knot, eyes that have earned their authority. She ignored the flapping notice, hugged Helga like colleagues who've survived budget seasons together, and shook my hand with the kind of grip that says, "I'm here to finish a thing." She took one slow circuit of the string lines, the stakes, the marked offsets. She checked the survey pins, scraped away a bit of grass with her shoe to expose a cap with a date on it that predates some marriages. She asked the young inspector for his photos from last week, and he handed her the tablet like a student giving a pencil back to the right teacher. She looked at the forms, then at the lake. Then she took the red paper and peeled it off the sawhorse like a band-aid that never should have been applied. "In compliance," she said, clear enough for the yard and whoever hid behind their curtains. She wrote it on her pad in block letters and tore off the sheet, handed it to me. "Post that instead." Helga exhaled the way I imagine divers do when they break the surface. The crew pretended not to cheer. Gunther smiled without showing teeth, the exact right amount of satisfaction. Ingrid turned to the young inspector and clapped his shoulder in a way that forgave the morning. "Good call bringing it to review. This lot's been yard since Nixon. Folks get creative when they don't like change." From the corner of my eye, I saw a familiar posture. Beat, rigid with a righteousness she had tailored into a virtue, coming down the driveway with a purposeful clip. Kurt trailed behind her, sunglasses on like a witness protection program for a conscience. "What is the meaning of this?" Beat demanded, gesturing at the pulled notice as if someone had yanked a halo off an angel. "The meaning," Ingrid said without warmth or apology, "is that the stop was lifted because there's no violation. Construction proceeds." Beat turned to me. "You think a little paper will save you from being reckless?" she asked, voice pitched for an audience that didn't show. "A little paper is what tried to stop us," I said. "A little paper just lost to a bigger paper that tells the truth," she huffed. "We know our rights. You know your preferences," Helga said softly. "Rights are written down." Beat opened her mouth and then, because the universe has structure, my phone sang its modest 2-note ring. I glanced down. Klaus. The timing made me think of Greta's sense of humor. I answered. "Yes, Dad," he said, and his voice had that thinness a man gets when the dog he didn't train finally dug under the fence. "I just found out about a petition." There was a rustle, Frida said in the background, insisting on sentences that kept her safe from the mirror. Mom and Dad, Beat and Kurt, filed affidavit. Frida filed it. I have a copy, I said. Hilda brought it. Ex parte denied. He went silent long enough for me to hear the small clocks in his kitchen. I didn't know, he said. Not defensive, not performative. Just late. You should have, I said. Not cruel. But now you do. I'll fix it, he said quickly, like getting out in front of a storm. We'll withdraw. I'll talk to. You'll show up, I said, and tell the judge the truth. That I'm competent. That you forgot who owns what. That your wife is frightened of not being in control. And your in-laws are frightened of gravity. Gravity? He asked, startled into a laugh. The tendency of things to fall where they belong, I said. Bring Dr. S.'s letter if you want to be useful. He exhaled. I'm sorry, he said, and it sounded like a man practicing the right sentence for use in other rooms. We can use that later, I said. Right now, tell your wife to leave City Hall alone. There was a muffled exchange. He came back. She says she just wanted to make sure you were safe. I am, I said. Because I'm not in your house. We hung up without ceremony. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Beat was still there, hands clutching her bag like she might need to throw it. She took one look at my face and chose to leave her speech for a different audience. She spun crisply and marched back up the driveway. Kurt gave me a shrug that meant, what can you do when a storm shares your last name? By 1 o'clock, the crew was back at work, measured, careful, as if the morning had only been a rehearsal for their poise. Helga called for lumber like a conductor cues the brass. Gunther fetched water for the crew, just a man with cups, no speech about leadership. I stood near the string line and thought about paper, how it can be a weapon or a shield, weather, shade or glare. Hilda slipped her arm through mine, her cheek against my shoulder for half a second like when she was 4. Do you want me at the hearing? She asked. I want you not to study law from people who don't like it, I said. But if you sit in the back and watch how truth sounds when it's not shouting, it might be worth the afternoon. She grinned. Elka says courtrooms are just very expensive rooms where calendars go to brag. She's not wrong, I said. That afternoon, I took the petition to Elka's office. She scanned it and shook her head once, the way a nurse does when a patient's chart pretends at drama. It'll die, she said. But I'll call Saul at the clerk's office to make sure it doesn't get lost in a pile. Thank you, I said. Also, someone filed a stop work order from the library, I heard, she said. I sent them a note about misuse of municipal resources and printed a little poster for the librarian about how to spot bad actors. It has clip art. You're a menace, I said. I'm an employee, she corrected. There's a difference. On my way out, Hilda intercepted me with another envelope. One more thing from the vault, she said, lowering her voice like a magician. Elka found it when she pulled your old title packet. A safe deposit authorization Greta added 15 years ago. She wrote a note and had it notarized. It names me and Jonas as contingent beneficiaries on a CD you opened the year Mom got sick. It's not huge, but it's hers. I took the paper. Greta's handwriting looked like her, confident, a little loopy at the ends, the way her laughter used to curl at parties. For the kids, she'd written. If you're reading this, I hope you're arguing over nothing important. Buy the good kind of shoes. The air left my lungs and came back a better kind. We'll let them pick their shoes, I said. Not their parents. Deal, Hilda said. That night in 7B, with the petition sitting under a ceramic bowl like a bug I was letting rest before crushing, I put on a record Jonas had rescued and let Ella tell me about nights that know their name. Halfway through the second track, my phone lit up with a text from Klaus. I told Frida we're withdrawing. She's furious. Her mother is worse. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm telling you I moved the line. Good, I wrote back. Lines hold houses up. The next morning, the skeleton of the porch appeared, a rectangle of intent. Helga and her crew framed with speed. You don't notice unless you've tried to do anything well. Gunther stood with his hands in his pockets like a dad at a little league game, keeping his advice to himself. Klaus arrived late, hair damp, a man who had argued before breakfast. He picked up a hammer and took instructions from a woman who knew exactly why men like to act like they invented nails. Hold here, Helga said. Strike true. Don't look at me. Look at the head. He did. The nail went in with a satisfying thunk. He smiled despite himself. Feels like building a sentence, he said. Only this one won't argue in the comments, she replied. At lunch, we sat on the deck steps and ate sandwiches from a cooler Gunther had brought without making a show. Hilda came by with iced tea and a manila folder under her arm because she can't resist carrying the right amount of authority. Clerk filed the withdrawal request, she said softly. Judge stamped dismissed without prejudice this morning. You won't have to go. Without prejudice? Gunther asked from the rail. Legal way of saying they could try again, Hilda said. But they'd need different facts. And we're fresh out. Klaus leaned back against the siding and stared at the yard, at the shape that had become a future. Thank you, he said, not to a person in particular, but to the collection of forces that had decided he could stop pretending control and start practicing responsibility. Thank yourself, I said. You stopped it. He rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand, a habit he's had since he was 12. Mom's not speaking to me. Beat told me I've disappointed my elders. Kurt asked if I knew a good lawyer. You know Elka, I said. That should be enough. He laughed, the sound of a hinge that's finally getting oil. The neighbor with the Subaru, whose name turned out to be Doris, wandered over with a plate of lemon bars, the universal language of wanting to be on the right side of a transformation. I figured you could use sugar, she said. Also, I like watching things get built out here. Beats television. Hi, Doris, Gunther said, taking the plate like a gentleman. We'll keep the noise to the civilized spectrum. I don't mind noise that ends with a porch, she said. I mind trucks that park on lawns they don't own. You all seem like you know where your wheels belong. We do today, I said. By late afternoon, the porch roof began to suggest itself, rafters angling toward a promise. Helga stood where a gutter would one day live and squinted at the horizon. See, she said to me, rain will sound right. I swallowed something I didn't want to confess and nodded. Rain that sounds right can fix a heart without asking it to go back to what it was. Late that day, when the crew had gone and the yard took a breath, Frida appeared at the corner of the house holding 2 cardboard boxes. She looked smaller out here, less televised. These are yours, she said, setting them down on the deck. Photos. The ones I didn't relocate. Thank you, I said. She stayed where she was, hands still on the flaps like a person who doesn't trust gravity. I didn't know about the library, she said finally, or the petition. Not until after. Mom overreaches. I let her. That's on me. Paper leaves trails, I said. The library has cameras. She blanched. She'll call it volunteer work, she said weakly, then gave up the joke. I married a good man and then forgot what that required of me. Klaus stepped onto the deck and sat on the step below her like a student. He put a hand out without touching. We're moving, he said. Birch Street. It's small. It's ours. It'll make us better. She stared at the yard, at the rectangle of something honest. Will he let us bring cookies? She asked, nodding at the corner where my porch would be. Yes, I said. As long as they're not gray. She barked a laugh she didn't expect to own. Deal, she said, and for the first time since 6 suitcases announced themselves in my living room, I saw a woman instead of an agenda. The sun dropped and the lake took on that particular metal blue that means supper is forgiving and the dishes can wait. I carried the 2 boxes to 7B like a man carrying memory to a room that deserved it. Hilda followed with the records under her arm. Jonas trailing with the lightness of a boy who knows he did something right and didn't break anything. In my small living room, we laid photos out on the table like a map that refuses to be folded the wrong way. Greta smiled from 4 decades at once, holding a pie in one, a baby in another, a book in a third. Klaus at 7 with an ice cream mustache. Hilda at 4 covering a kitten with a blanket while it learned patience. Jonas in a pool pretending to be a sea creature. A shot of our deck the year we stained it too dark and learned about regret in a color. "Can I take this one?" Hilda asked, touching a photo of Greta laughing at something no one else could see. "Take 3, I said. Frames come in pairs." As the kids left with their armfuls of portable history, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize, local. I answered. "Mr. Mueller," a woman's voice. "Careful. This is Greta from the library on Spruce. I wanted you to know someone used our public terminal to try to file municipal complaints. We're cooperating with the city. We've put up a reminder that anonymity isn't immune to manners." "I'm sorry." "Don't be," I said. "Libraries save us more often than they incriminate us." She laughed, relieved. "Come by sometime," she said. "We have a photograph exhibit next week about the lake in winter." "I'll bring a granddaughter whose staples are straight," I said. After I hung up, I thought about all the silent things that had helped me stand. The people who made a plan and stuck to it, the ones who answered a question honestly, the ones who gave a compliment that wasn't about appearance, but about a feeling. The ones who found a record collection, a scarf, or a photograph and knew it belonged somewhere else. In my drawer, the papers were no longer a pile of defenses, but an inventory of allies. I picked up the little postcard Greta had sent and thought about a quiet library on a street where I was a long way from home and a long way from being lost. I opened the door to my balcony and felt the wind come in like a story that knew where it was supposed to begin. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't wait to be told what was next. I went to the fridge, got a beer, and sat down to watch the light go out over the water, ready to build. I shifted a chair a foot, and then another, the same way my wife, Greta, used to move lamps until the light settled in just right. When I found the spot, that place where the lake's quiet murmur and the roof's patient silence made a harmony you could live with, Hilda gave a little nod like a supervisor checking off a job well done. "Right there," she said. "That's where you'll be when you forget what day it is, and it won't matter one bit." By 1 o'clock, the little place had learned all our names. Anton showed up in a sports coat and jeans, carrying a bottle he swore was sparkling apple juice from a fancy grocery store that has a reputation for being honest. Elka came in her lunch hour clothes, hair still pinned up like she was ready to balance a ledger. Silka showed up from Oak Ridge in scrubs and a sweater with a coffee stain she didn't apologize for. Ute from the front desk brought a clipboard out of habit and a bouquet of flowers because she's just a good person. Doris, the neighbor with the Subaru and the lemon bars, brought more lemon bars, because why mess with a good thing? Gunther raised his glass. "To correction," he said simply. "To correction," we all repeated, and I felt Gustav's hand clap my shoulder with just the right amount of pressure. There should have been some grand speech. Folks always expect that at a time like this, someone to say words that make everyone feel like their part was noble and important. I didn't give one. I put on a record instead. Ella Fitzgerald's voice came out of the little turntable and climbed the porch. The rafters settled in like a bird that knows which houses deserve a song. And that was enough, a few notes instead of 1,000 explanations, a tune where a lecture might have been. We ate carrot cake off paper plates that didn't insult anyone. We told short stories that made the long ones easier to carry. Jonas asked Helga if he could keep the little stub of a pencil she used to mark the studs, and she said yes, but made him promise to build something trivial and something important with it. A birdhouse and a boundary, she explained. He said okay, like a boy accepting an oath that would only make sense to him later. Around 3 o'clock, Johanna called from the bank to drop a small stone in the water that made ripples I'd planned and then forgotten to anticipate. "Mr. Mueller," she said. "I wanted to confirm the wire you asked me to hold." "What wire?" I stepped away from the porch crowd to hear her better. "The security deposit," she said, "for Maple Avenue. You told me to wait until the certificate of occupancy came through, then forward it to the property owner on record. Right?" "Right," I said, feeling a smile I didn't let anyone see. "Forwarded already," she said. "Also, the rent assistance fund you set up 2 months ago posted. It won't show on their ledger as being from you, as requested." I looked at Klaus and Frida, at the way they moved together around a table, learning to hand each other things instead of barking commands. "Good," I said quietly. "Let it stay anonymous." "It won't," Johanna said. "Not here." "How's that?" "Gunther already knows. He told me as much in a sentence folks often miss. I have a place on Maple Avenue," he said. "We'll call it a reference. Men like him tell you the truth, and we hear it as generosity, which is also true." "Thank you, Johanna," I said, "for doing what paper does when it favors mercy." After we hung up, Gunther drifted over and leaned on the porch rail like he was just resting and not performing an act of kindness. "You did a good thing," he murmured. "I did a correcting thing," I said. "You did the good part." "I reduce rent for people who learn in public," he said. "It's a hobby." "You also own their lease," I said, almost laughing. "I do," he said, not sheepish. "For a year and a half after that, they get options. Option A, renew with a built-in dignity discount. Option B, buy at a number that won't make them into sermons at dinner parties. I prefer option B because it changes how people stand in their kitchens." "You'll tell them?" I asked. "Not today," he said. "No need to turn a porch into a stage." We stood for a while in the quiet, watching the lake make old arguments to the shore and winning them in the same patient way. Then the last guest I expected to see walked up the new path to my door. Beat, without Kurt. She wore a coat that could colonize a coat rack and a face that had practiced disapproval for so long it could do it while sleeping. "I brought cookies," she said, holding out a tin with both hands. "And I didn't laugh because I've been wrong before and will be again. Shortbread, not gray." "Thank you," I said, taking the tin. "You can leave them there." She didn't step over the threshold. She looked at the small house, at the angle of its roof, at the way the porch chairs positioned themselves like witnesses who would not be moved. "It's nice," she said, as if the word might bite her for using it. "It is," I said. She swallowed. For the first time since she'd marched into my life, something about her seemed not brittle, but tired. "I was wrong," she said, and the sentence was so small and so enormous I had to lean in to hear it. "I thought safety meant control. I'm old enough to know better. Safety is the thing that lets you watch someone else make coffee without correcting where they keep the spoons," I said. She almost smiled. "I don't know how to be that kind," she said very softly. "But I'd like to try. I can't promise about Christmas." "You can practice at Thanksgiving," I said. She nodded, then straightened as if she'd remembered who her friends were. "Well," she said, back in costume, "enjoy your porch." She turned to go, then paused and looked at me with a human face. "The roof sounds right," she admitted and left before she could be forgiven. After she went, Elka sidled up with a document rolled like a scroll and a mischief she rarely allows herself. "Gifting you one more boring thing," she said. "Gunther recorded the deed covenant we discussed. It's on the title now and forever." I unrolled it. Plain language, her doing. The main house may not be converted or remodeled in a way that removes the detached accessory dwelling's access to light, water, or peace. The accessory dwelling unit is granted a life estate to Oscar J. Mueller. Upon his death, the structure remains at the owner's discretion for community use, or the lot may be restored, provided a donation of equal value is made to the public library's winter heating fund. Signed, recorded, stamped paper that makes shores. You gave the library an inheritance, Hilda said, reading over my shoulder, delighted. Someone has to keep the lights on where complaints get born and fixed, I said. Mom will hate it, she whispered. She'll learn to like heat, I said, and she laughed into her sleeve. Mid-afternoon brought a small twist I didn't write but recognized as the last puzzle piece snapping into place. Hilda was digging through the box of photos Frida had brought and paused with her hand inside like she'd touched a live wire. She pulled out a plain envelope, yellowed at the edges, Greta's handwriting on the front, for when the house is too big. In the corner, a notary's stamp from 16 years ago, as if my wife had decided to be legitimate in her mischief. Read it, I said, though my hands went cold. Hilda slid a finger under the flap and took out 2 pages. Her voice changed when she read, as if she'd been handed someone else's lungs. Oscar, she began. If you've opened this, it means I didn't get to be old with you inside those walls. The house will be too big one day, not because you're small, but because grief has its square footage. Do not drown in it. If I could plan you're stubborn, I'd build you a little place near enough to the water to hear it make its small arguments. 2 chairs for weather, a kitchen for simple food, a room where paper lives in order. If you cannot build it, find someone who hates gray and wants to be generous with their money. Make sure the roof sounds right. Hilda stopped because we were all looking at the roof like idiots in a church. She kept reading. If the children turn into their worst fears, give them a smaller space and a reason to learn to cook. If they turn into their best selves, hand them a lemon bar and let them pick your records. Tell Gustav he was right about the correction. Tell myself I was right about corners. I love you. Put my scarf where the light finds it. Gee. I put a hand on the wall, and the wall held me up. The porch listened. Gunther looked at the lake, which is what good men do when another man is busy not falling. Helga wiped at her eye with the back of her wrist like she'd mistakenly chalked her face. Elka, a notary in the presence of a better document, cleared her throat and said, well then, because what else do you say when permission arrives on paper you didn't know you needed? I guess we followed instructions, I said, my voice not entirely mine. You married a woman who wrote the manual, Gustav said softly. Klaus took the letter from Hilda and read it again for himself, then handed it back with a care I hadn't seen him extend to any paper not denominated in dollars. She knew, he said, astonished. She knew who we'd be. She knew corners, I said. The rest follows. By late day, the shadows grew long enough to make the porch look older than it is, which is the trick of any structure worth loving. Anton packed up his bottle and his smile. Elka gave me one last stack of receipts and ruled lines. Johanna texted a photo of the closed ledger with a caption that said, simply balanced. Silke hugged me the way nurses hug, quick, warm, watchful for dignity. Ute snapped a picture of the porch with the late sun on it and said she was going to put it on her fridge as a reminder that forms can end in furniture. Doris, the neighbor, left with an empty lemon bar plate and a promise to bring deviled eggs when it's warm. Klaus stayed to fix a sticky latch because he needed a job he could complete with a small tool and a bigger heart. Frida washed 2 cups in a sink she didn't own anymore and set them on a towel, like surrender was teaching her manners. Jonas stretched out on the rug and asked the kind of questions boys ask when they've seen men build something without yelling. Can we put a hook for a wind chime? Can I paint a sign that says porch, but like, subtle? Yes, I said. And yes. Hilda hung Greta's red scarf on the hook by the door where the light would find it in the morning. It threw its little flag of permission over the entry like it had been practicing all week for this exact hour. We ate another slice of carrot cake without announcement. We didn't toast. We didn't group hug. We put our hands where hands go in a home, on chair backs, on door frames, on the railing you reach for without looking. This is how you bless a place when you've had your fill of speeches. Near dusk, Klaus stepped out onto the porch and stood with me where the sound is right. He shifted his weight from foot to foot and then landed on a sentence he'd been carrying like lumber. "Dad," he said, "I can't give you back what I took. The time, the quiet, the feeling of being the owner of your own Tuesday. I can only say I see it now." He looked at the lake. "I thought I was grown because I had a mortgage and a calendar. That wasn't it." "What is it?" I asked. "Standing where the wind knows you," he said, surprising me. "And not using my fear as an excuse to move other people around like furniture." He exhaled. "I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "Be different. That's how apologies work." He nodded like a man taking orders from a commander he trusts. "We'll have you over," he said. "To Maple Avenue. It's small. It'll make us better." "It's already making you honest," I said. "That's the larger square footage anyway." He smiled. "We'll make spaghetti. Mom will cook a sauce that takes all day because she thinks the stove is how you pray. I'll set the table and not try to fix the chairs while people are sitting in them. Hilda will bring a salad dressed with lemon. Jonas will wire a speaker wrong and pretend it was on purpose. I'll bring records," I said, "and leave early because I like my bed." "Deal," he said. He went back inside to help Frida close the tin in a way that wouldn't leave crumbs, and I sat down and watched the light do what it does at endings, slip out politely and let lamps have their moment. The roof made the noise it promised when the evening wind arrived, a soft consonant like a thought. The lake tapped the shore with the patience of a spouse who knows you're coming around. When it was fully dark, the last of them left in a clatter of farewells that didn't pretend to be final. I turned off the kitchen light, checked the bolt on the back door without fuss, and stepped out onto the porch alone. The cold smelled clean, like pages. I put a record on, the Goodman Summer one Jonas rescued, and let the horns lean into the night. Somewhere in that old brass were all the men I've been: husband, father, postal inspector, patient, seller, buyer, resident, neighbor, the man with a letter in his pocket and another on his wall. The revenge I thought I wanted months ago had turned into something else on its own. Not punishment, but proportion. I hadn't burned anyone's house down. I'd right-sized my own. Inside, on the little table, the petition notice sat under a plant coaster doing its final good work, leveling a wobble. On the wall behind, paint and promise, my word, enough, rested in its stud. Enough not meaning, no more, not meaning, I'm done, meaning, sufficient, plentiful, fit to purpose. You asked me once in another lifetime that still held the yellow kitchen what the secret is to living in a house that doesn't eat you. I didn't have an answer then. I have one now. Write things down. Keep your corners. Choose your porch. Trust the roof to make the right noise. And when the day comes that people you love mistake control for care, pick correction and pick it early. Then leave room for mercy, even if you're the last to know you planned it. A soft patter started in the eaves, the kind of rain that doesn't ask to be announced. I sat and let it find the tempo, then the groove. The sound moved across the boards to where my feet were, and then out into the yard where the grass was practicing what it would do in spring. The lake answered, knocking in that steady way it has when it would like to be allowed inside your chest. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and tried Greta's name on the air. It fit. The scarf by the door lifted the smallest amount, like a person catching a joke late but choosing to laugh anyway. I thought of the envelope, of the sentence about stairs and corners and roofs. I thought of my son setting a table on Maple Avenue, his wife learning a new kind of quiet, my granddaughter cataloging deeds and dates, my grandson wiring a speaker correctly the second time and calling it a miracle because it will be. The record hissed. The rain stitched. The roof signed its name. I am home. Not because the house is mine, but because life is.